You're tuned in to Horror Slop, where the stories are rotting, truth is twisted, and sleep, forget about it.
Yeah, welcome to the pit. It's gross, it's creepy, and honestly, it's kind of my vibe. Hope you like nightmares, because tonight's tale, it slithers.
Straight from the darkest corners of Reddit. Real stories, real fear, and just enough blood to stain your soul.
So at least grab your bed sheets, so grab a flashlight, and maybe a therapist.
This is Horror Slop.
Alright, kicking things off with a personal favorite. It's messy, it's weird, and it sets the tone real fast. Story 1. Don't blink.
As part of a strange medical study, I was offered $5,000 to be killed and revived in the hopes of discovering the afterlife. What I experienced will haunt me for the rest of my years, by Christopher Maxim. I guess so. This was risky business. I would be humanely injected and gassed with various chemicals to render me medically dead. Then, I would be revived to report my findings as part of a study on near-death experiences and the afterlife. If I survived, $5,000 would be deposited into my bank account as payment. Don't worry, Jack. We've done this dozens of times so far and have yet to lose a single soul. You'll be fine. Alright, Jack. I'll be in the next room behind the one-way glass. You'll be able to hear me over the intercom. Once we start, there's no going back. This is your last chance. Are you absolutely sure you want to go through with this? I mulled it over for a moment, but the choice was clear. There were certainly other options at my disposal for recouping my financial losses, but that wasn't the only reason I agreed to take part in the study. The real reason I was risking my life ran much deeper than that. A smile spread across his face. That's the spirit. Dr. Covenwood scurried out to the control room and fired up the intercom as quick as he could, probably to get the ball rolling before I changed my mind. I nodded at the camera hanging above me from the ceiling. Alright, Jack. This is it. See you on the other side. ////. However inexplicable it may seem, I was in what appeared to be the lobby of a large building. There were hardwood floors, lavish staircases, and gorgeous rays of light flooding the room from tall, stained glass windows on every side of me. Directly in my line of sight was a desk and what appeared to be a receptionist. He looked up and smiled. In an instant, without even getting up from his seat, the man was in front of me. Before I could react, he took me by the arm and we appeared somewhere upstairs by the balcony in front of a door. Overwhelmed by everything, I didn't enter the room right away and instead leaned over the railing and surveyed the area. That's when I noticed a plethora of shelves lining the walls, each with their own collection of jars, a soft light emanating from within. I wanted to study them further, but was cut off by a booming voice that echoed through the hall. Come in, Jack. I haven't got all day. Please, Jack. Have a seat. Sitting at a desk in the room was a clean-cut man in turn-of-the-century attire, gesturing at the chair in front of me. I sat and the man stared me down. If he was trying to intimidate me, it was working. He was right. I did. He chuckled. So heaven is a cathedral? Who said anything about heaven? There is no good or bad place, just this. And no, it's not a cathedral. It appears different to every departed soul. You see it as a cathedral, another might see it as a monastery, or even a small cottage tucked away in the hills. Whatever peaceful scenery makes the transition easier. Ah, I see. Now I understand. Is that why you joined Dr. Covenwood's little study group? That I wouldn't have predicted. He saw the surprise in my expression. Oh yes, Jack. I know all about the good doctor and his trials. He works for us. My surprise turned to confusion. I can't believe a human would risk his own life on the off chance he might be reunited with loved ones. It's admirable, I suppose, but no, Jack, you will not see Charlotte and Leslie. We have far more important business to attend to. He walked around to the opposite side of me with the cart and pushed it up against the table. I winced and let out a small scream. He laughed. He closed his eyes and trembled. We were never meant to devour souls, but we've been here for so long. Billions of years. Maybe more. We, like all things, need stimulation. To that end, we face but one obstacle. The pesky laws of this realm dictate that we can neither lie nor take what isn't ours. It's a failsafe of the Creator's design, put in place to keep us from harming you, making it physically impossible to extract your soul without consent. You must give it to us willingly. Why would I do something like that? That's the beauty of our arrangement. When a normal soul dies, we give them the option. Let us cut you open and take your soul, or live in a jar for all eternity. There's almost no incentive to hand it over, so almost everyone chooses the latter option. In your case, your time isn't up. The doctor is waiting on the other side to revive you, but I won't let him unless you give me what I want. Time will remain still until your soul is mine. Your 30 seconds will never end. He licked his lips in anticipation. It was a lot to process. Still, none of it mattered. Seeing my wife and daughter again was the only thing keeping me going. Knowing that I couldn't be with them eliminated any incentive I would have had to continue living. You will give me your soul and I will rip away every last fiber of your flesh to get it. He dug a silver blade into my chest and drooled over the wound. It was like battery acid. Worse than any pain I had ever felt before. I screamed in agony. He backed away, wiped his chin, and his face returned to normal. His grin returned. You misunderstand, Jack. The torture you will experience is not of a physical nature. He snapped his fingers and we were transported again, somewhere else entirely. The overseer appeared before me. His lips stretched wide across his cheeks. Stop it. Jack, she fell in. Jack, help. Oh my God, she's unconscious. Jack. Just as I did that night, I dropped the branches in my hand and ran as fast as I could towards the lake. Recreation or not, I couldn't ignore my family. Your wife jumped in to save her, but her legs were far too weak to swim. The overseer appeared at every tree I passed, his voice staying with me every step of the way. The physical therapy worked wonders, but she had only been out of her wheelchair for a month. He was right. On her way to work, Charlotte was struck by a drunk driver. She survived, but her spine suffered a lot of damage. The doctors weren't sure she would walk again. This camping trip was supposed to be a celebration. It was the first thing Charlotte wanted to do when she was upright again. All right, Jack. Time for round 2. I turned to the overseer, standing by my side, and took a swing, but there was no connection. My fist stopped inches from his smug face, halted by an unseen force. He cackled in response. Why are you doing this? I ran to the lake. Faster this time. Still, when I arrived, they were gone. No. I won't do it. I can save them, this time. I know I can. Charlotte continued to call out for me, I continued to run. After it was done, it started again. And again. And again. All the while, the overseer stayed and watched and laughed. Eventually, I cried myself dry. I pressed on anyway, determined to save them, even if it was all part of an elaborate illusion. I needed this. More than the overseer knew. Eventually, he interrupted. "Stop, Jack." I ignored him at first. He snapped his fingers and I was back in the woods. This time, I was completely alone and a dark fog hung above the forest's canopy, cloudy and still. Focused, I ran past the trees, but Charlotte's voice never met my ear. Something was amiss. They stood up. Charlotte and Leslie's lifeless bodies now stood upright before me, eyes darker than the deep abyss they were pulled from. Water spilled from their mouths as they walked toward me. Charlotte then spoke. I backed away in terror, sobbing the whole way. "Charlotte, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Leslie stepped ahead. "Why didn't you save me, Daddy?" I fell to my knees as they approached. "I love you both so much and miss you terribly. Please forgive me. I never meant for this to happen. You lived. You don't deserve forgiveness on top of that." She pressed her lips to mine and the taste of death coated my tongue. I tried to disconnect, but she forced me against her with brute strength, her arms wrapped tightly around my head. Then, she began sucking the air from lungs. Leslie chimed in. I struggled and struggled, but couldn't break free. Just before losing the last drop of air in my lungs, something happened. It was faint at first, but then grew to an audible whisper. I recognized it as it crept into my ear. It was the same disembodied voice that followed me to the afterlife. I could now tell that it was that of Charlotte. The real Charlotte. "Save us, Jack. Please, Jack. You have to make a deal with the overseer." "Make a deal. Okay. I could do that." By some miracle, I was able to rip myself away and inhale as much oxygen as I could in one breath. Then, before the corpses could attack again, I called out to the overseer. The dead versions of Charlotte and Leslie vanished. The sky opened up, revealing a full moon. Its dim light soaked small ripples in the lake as the overseer walked up from behind. Fine. For the most part, they stay, untouched, in their jars, on their shelves. But, sometimes, we take them out and ask again for consent. Ask how. How do you do that? Torture. My blood was boiling. I wanted to lash out, but Charlotte's voice soothed me. All right. I'm going to give you a choice. The overseer scoffed at me. You're going to give me a choice? Yes. I can guarantee you that Charlotte won't give in to your head games and neither will I, not so long as we have each other. You can either keep trying and torture us until the end of time, or, if you have better things to attend to, and I'm sure you do, you can let me go. He looked shocked. He stood back and pondered for a moment. There was no way I would accept those terms, but Charlotte's voice chimed in. Take the deal, Jack. It will be fine. We'll have 2 years to find a way out of it. The overseer smiled and then snapped his fingers. Backslash backslash backslash. I know. I know. I'm sorry, Jack. It's just the way it has to be. This research is vital to the progression of mankind. He finished bandaging me up, undid my straps, and backed away, probably expecting a fist to the face. You're just lucky I was able to make a deal with the overseer to protect my family. Actually, Jack, that was all a part of the plan. One soul at a time used to cut it, but as of late, the overseer wants more. He let out a loud sigh before continuing. The sound of tapping away at a keyboard came through the speaker, followed by a voice. Charlotte's voice. "Save us, Jack." My heart sank. I used old recordings of your wife and created a simple program that would allow me to alter my voice to sound like hers. Everything I said over the intercom, you were able to hear on the other side. I'm so sorry, Jack.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
My Husband Left Me a Note, by Blair Daniels. The floor was strewn with construction paper, glue sticks, and glitter. In the center was Emma, her hands on a pile of jagged, misshapen hearts. "Why not?" Emma said, her scissors cutting wildly into the paper. Her face grew red, and she smeared the glitter with newfound ferocity. "I'm not a kid. I'm 8 years old. 8. Cat. Call. Put your phone down. Tonight, I want your body." "Nothing," I said, stuffing the notes into my pocket. I'm going to look for Mr. Whiskers, okay?" When Jack finally climbed into bed, I curled up against him. "I've been looking forward to tonight," I said, in the best sultry voice I could muster. He smiled at me. "Yeah. Why's that?" I let my hair brush against his neck, the satin chemise touch his back. "I got your note." "What are you talking about?" Annoyed, I stood up, picked up my jeans, and fished for the note. "This one," I said, throwing the crumpled pieces of paper onto the bed. He stepped forward. In the dim light, he was white as a sheet. Hands shaking, he laid the pieces of paper on the nightstand. I walked over, my heart pounding, and read them slowly. "Tonight, I want your body. Put your phone down. I'll know if you call." I already got the cat. My heart pounded, and I heard ringing in my ears.
You feel that? That weird pressure in the room? Yeah, that's the algorithm. It knows you're watching, and it gets real cranky when you don't feed it. A simple ritual helps. Click the little thumbs up, tap subscribe, say its name 3 times into your phone mic. Kidding, probably.
Engagement appeases the darkness. You know what to do.
Good, human. Now, back to the horror.
My family and I have been going through a very strange experience over the last couple of months. It's hard to even put into words or explain what is going on. I guess I can just start off from where it all started to feel off. That being said, we don't normally have all my aunts and uncles in a house at once. This was a rare occasion to have a family meal when they were all free. Is burning food genetic or something? How on earth do you guys always do that to food? The Jensens need to leave the cooking to the Millers. My mom said with a sarcastic giggle. Uncle Ken looked at her confused. What are you on about, Liz? Uncle Ken snapped back. I mean, Margot burnt the hot dogs and Matt always burns food when he cooks. Remember, we had to ban him for months from cooking because we had to order takeout like 3 times in a row. Everyone at the table laughed, recalling their memories. Sighs of recollection bounced back and forth from person to person when my dad spoke up in Aunt Margot's defense. "Honey, what are you talking about? Matt is your brother. I really shouldn't have to remind you of that." My mom rolled her eyes in response to my dad. "Liz, what are you talking about? He is on your side. He is a Miller," my Aunt Margot said as she scraped off the burnt edges of her hot dog. After a few minutes, my mom got out her phone. She found an old family photo from when she was a kid. In the photo were her, my grandparents, my Uncle Paul, and my Aunt June. Nothing out of the ordinary. After looking at the picture, Aunt Margot got out her phone and looked for an old childhood photo. "I know an easy solution you might be thinking of is to just call him up." That's also what I said, but he was working and they didn't want to interrupt him, but guess what? I needed answers, so I decided to call him. However, when I looked at my phone I couldn't find him in my contacts. I looked through it multiple times. I remembered texting him about something a few days back, so he should have been in my text history. Still nothing. Uncle Andrew showed a picture of the back of a bald man who looked pretty tall. Aunt June called him crazy and recalled him having long curly red hair. It wasn't like we hadn't seen him in a year or that he was some kind of distant memory. "I saw the guy last week. He came over to my house to help me with some homework, and I can tell you he didn't have red hair or no hair at all. He was, well, shoot. I can't remember what he looked like now that I think about it." I could tell the adults wanted to talk more but didn't want to worry the younger cousins. My older cousin Maddie clearly didn't care about anything that was going on. She just wanted to sleep. We convinced her to take my 3 young cousins into the basement so they could all get some sleep. But not me, I was invested. Uncle Matt and I are close. We see each other all the time. How could I not have a shred of evidence that he even existed? My mom recalled a story of Matt and my dad going to a lake to fish, but the hook got stuck on Matt's hat and went flying. My dad told us he remembered my mom telling him the same exact story many times. Soon everyone was on the phone with a new family member trying to tell them the situation and asking what they thought about everything. My aunts and uncles were talking to realities on the phone I didn't know I had. Relatives that probably only met Matt a couple times at best. All I heard was one dead end at a time. No one knew where he came from or where he went. After hours of discussion, we compiled a list of attributes that never wavered about Uncle Matt. That might seem like a random grouping of facts, but that's because it was. We couldn't even remember where his house was. Some of us completely forgot and others remembered different houses. It didn't matter. We weren't going to start knocking on doors to find a man we were concerned never existed. We started to believe that as soon as we began to question who he was, he just simply started to fade away into nothingness. Like it was some kind of self-destructive on his own consciousness. It was around 9 a.m. that morning when people started to fall asleep on couches. The night before started with everyone being determined and saying the night wouldn't end until we found Uncle Matt, but here we all were. Exhausted and with little to no answers. It felt like accepting defeat by napping on the couch, but we couldn't do much else. At 11 a.m. we all woke up to the sound of my cousins playing in the next room over. We all sat up and rubbed our eyes. You could practically see the gears turning in everyone's heads as they woke up from their stupors. I could tell when they realized their memories actually happened and it wasn't just a weird fever dream. "Cass, you are not in trouble. This is very important. Are you telling me Uncle Matt was with you guys last night?" Uncle Andrew tried to say in a gentle tone to not scare Cass. "I mean, not the whole night, but he brought us all cookies and put a movie on for us. Then he said he wanted to go hang out with you guys upstairs." Cass told us with a quiet voice. I noticed something when I started to count the objects in the room. There were 10 adults and me upstairs last night. So, there should have been 11 people in total, but I saw 12 plates out with the leftover crumbs from our late-night pizza, 12 spots laid out for sleeping in the living room, and 12 mugs or cups of coffee. They mentioned how it felt like it never actually happened, but he managed to place the memory in them after the fact. How else would they see Uncle Matt right in front of them and not realize what was happening? "Wait, something is off here," I said loudly to the room. "Everyone line up on the wall, I want to try something." Other members of the family even tried to count. We did it over and over again. Even adding one of the kids to the mix, but every single time there was one extra person, but we still couldn't see him. How was he hiding in plain sight? Once we developed disturbing memories of him, we tried to tell the police. Of course, they couldn't find any evidence of his existence, so they couldn't help us. It didn't help our case that we couldn't even give them a last name. How on earth are they supposed to find a guy based on his name being Matt and no physical features? It seems to be a family joke at this point. Always leaving out an extra plate for him or something. In my opinion, no one is taking this situation seriously. I know he hasn't hurt anyone, but why should we wait for something to happen? I swear I can feel it when he shows up. The hairs on the back of my neck stand up. My family has given up on trying to figure out who or what Uncle Matt is. But I haven't. I will find you, Uncle Matt. I will find out what you are.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
My wife came home late last night, but whatever that thing was on my security camera, it sure wasn't her, by Ghost at the Feast 22. For context, my house sits on a good amount of land that sits next to a large open field to the left of it. There's a few acres of trees beyond the field. A small forest, as my wife likes to say. I've never seen anything like this before. If anyone reading this has ever been in a similar situation, or possibly knows what it could be and most importantly, what I can do, please reach out. I tried to tell her it was probably some teenagers from town, just finding something exciting to do, but she wouldn't hear of it. She didn't care about the flower pots or lawn ornaments that much, but she didn't want the situation to escalate into a home invasion. I thought that was a little dramatic, but I knew when to keep my mouth shut. After 2 days we finally solved the mystery of the missing lawn decor. You probably already figured it out. If you guessed 2 raccoons, you'd be dead on. It was kinda hilarious watching them scooping up my wife's solar garden lights, and carrying them off on 2 legs. Watching them running away with those bright blue bulbs in their hands like 2 little burglars was pretty funny. They even looked the part with those masks. Even Michelle couldn't keep a straight face. Michelle started putting out bowls of cat kibble, and amazingly the thievery stopped. Michelle has been out of town for work for the last 4 days. She was supposed to be home last night around dinner, but called to tell me the plane had been delayed and she wouldn't be home until 4 a.m. or later. I told her I loved her and I'd see her when she came home. And that was that. It was an average night. Nothing out of the ordinary. I straightened up the house so she wouldn't come home to a disaster. I made some soup for dinner, and fed the cat. After, me and Mona curled up on the couch together, me watching TV while she purred on my chest. Now it wasn't unusual to get an alert, especially late at night. It was always some little critter, a fox or raccoon. But I grabbed my phone off my nightstand to check anyway. It was well after 2, and my immediate thought was that Michelle had gotten home earlier than she thought she would. I laid there listening for the sound of Michelle letting herself in, but it never came. Only silence. I didn't jump right up to check though, as I still hadn't heard her knock. So I opened the app, and pulled up the live feed. She stayed that way for a long moment, like a creepy mannequin. After a minute her lips slowly puckered out into a pout, as though she were an upset toddler. Smile. Pout. Frown. Repeat. After watching her for nearly 15 minutes, I finally recovered from my shock and confusion and pressed the intercom. Her mouth was partially hanging open on one side, caught between a smile and a frown. She didn't answer me, only continued to stare, her face frozen in that disturbing look. I waited for a long moment, unsure how to proceed. The longer I watched her, the more I realized just how strange she looked. In response to my question, Michelle stamped her foot down on the porch, hard, shaking her head. "I'm not letting you inside," I said quickly. "I'm home," she said. Her voice, like her face, was similar, but not a complete match. It went from nasally to almost baby-like. "I'm home. Open the door." "Maybe I should call for help," I said. Michelle, or the thing that was desperately trying to be her, seemed to stretch right in front of my eyes. Her torso thinned out and grew so that her head slid against the ceiling. Its skin looked so tight that I could actually hear it pulling, wobbling, and rubber-like. It had obvious trouble staying on 2 feet, but it managed. It tried to close its mouth, but it couldn't do it completely, and its jaw just sort of hung there against its chest. "I'm calling the police," I shouted, fear overwhelming me. After an hour without seeing her again, I finally felt safe enough to set the phone down and try to sleep. I thought about calling my wife, but part of me was too scared I'd hear that poor imitation on the other end. I fell into a restless sleep sometime later. I didn't sleep long before my phone woke me again. Another notification. She was standing on the porch, her suitcase at her feet, as she rummaged through her purse. Probably searching for her keys. "Lost your keys again?" I said, pressing the intercom. She jumped at the sound of my voice, almost dropping her purse. I couldn't help but smile. She always had a way of making me feel completely at ease, even after witnessing a nightmare just hours prior. I sat up and slipped on my slippers, and got to my feet. That's when I caught some movement on the screen. Far off in the field, a head rose up from the grass, standing tall on a neck much too long to come from anything human. I couldn't help but scream. It was coming for my wife, and it was coming fast, even with its unstable gait. I leaned against the door, panting hard. I heard a muffled thump on the porch, but then it was quiet. My wife was scared, pale and nearly in tears. She refused to talk about what she'd seen and didn't want to see the footage of the thing on our porch. I let her get some sleep, assuring her that the house was secure. I was scared to see it again, maybe that's why I waited. But seconds before I pulled it open, those long arms reached out, gripping my wife by her shoulders and ripping her backwards off the porch, my wife able to scream only once. I didn't see what it did with her, but I did see it step up onto the porch, positioning itself in front of the door, its limbs adjusting to a more human appearance. Just before my hand shot out to pull it inside, that thing grinned up at the camera, its lips stretched impossibly wide. For a moment I almost didn't believe it. It was as if my brain wouldn't allow it. But as I stood in the hallway, attempting to process what I'd seen, and what that meant, I heard the unmistakable sound of something shuffling up behind me. Jack said it must have been a bird that had done it. Flew the hair up there for nesting material. I guess he didn't see the blood splatter along the trunk. I agreed, but I know it won't make much of a difference. Michelle is long gone by now. I just hope she didn't suffer. The police are here, finally done with their search of the woods. I guess I'll have to go through the motions. It's not like I have any other choice. Not unless I want to spend the rest of my days in a padded room, although considering the alternative it's not a bad idea.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
My fiancé died a month before our wedding date. It was the kind of freak accident that you would see on Final Destination, and the injuries she received were not just, of course, fatal, but disfiguring as well. I had to identify her body, and she was unrecognizable from the waist up. The only reference I had to confirm her identity was a tattoo she had on the outside of her right thigh, 2 butterflies with their wings interlocked. The butterflies were meant to represent us. She got it the day after we announced our engagement. It was indeed miraculous. A horrible miracle devised by an insane God. And of course I was sad. She had been a lovely woman and I had loved her very much. But her death had solved an awkward predicament I'd been mulling over for a while. I had been wondering how I could call the wedding off. Eager to try on her wedding dress, Em had apparently attempted to put it on alone. Most of the following events have been put together by eyewitnesses, the coroner, and CCTV footage, but it appears that Em, my sweet, clumsy bride, had somehow gotten stuck in the dress. It was a tricky piece of clothing, according to the traumatized shop assistant, with a lace-up corset back and a number of ties and straps besides. Tangled in the confines of the dress, hands over her head and face covered, Em had stumbled from the changing rooms seeking help. The dress was quite heavy, despite its floaty appearance, and it's possible she panicked. The CCTV shows her bumping into a side table and falling over, the vase on the table toppling and a considerable amount of water tipping onto the dress fabric. The inquest that followed her death suggested that the water on the fabric over her face would have produced a suffocating effect, like waterboarding, and from her struggles to free herself it was clear she was in some distress. It was heartbreaking to watch. That's not what killed her, however. She had to have been exhausted by then. She tottered here and there, a zigzag path of despair that the soulless eye of the camera recorded, and by some horrible miracle managed to bump into the full-length mirror angled against the wall. Em wasn't a heavy woman, but she fell heavily, and the mirror shattered into a multitude of potentially deadly shards which flew everywhere. Everyone watching the footage winced in unison, I recall, as the jagged glass exploded around her. It was a bright, sunny day. The boutique was coincidentally positioned so that it got the full benefit of the natural light. And somehow, through some bizarre twist of fate, the sunshine happened to fall upon a large mirror shard in such a way that it reflected back into the eyes of a passing lorry driver. Temporarily blinded, the driver had hit another car, and upon feeling the impact had tried to swerve. As a result, the huge vehicle had crashed through the storefront, mowing down the white-clad mannequins in the window, and had not stopped its momentum until its front wheels had crushed the life from my fiancée. It may be obvious from my recounting of her personality that I had some affection for her. I did. She was warm and funny and sweet. Everyone loved her. So why did I not want to marry her? That is the tricky part. Her eyes were the first to suffer. Be careful, she had always said to me, only half joking. I might infect you. And although she never infected me in the literal sense, I was affected by her symptoms. I know you will all be judging me now, but imagine your own loved one with half their formerly lovely face transformed into a mask of scar tissue and twisted flesh. It looked like a piece of fruit with a section taken out, the section replaced by a gnarled and warped knot of toughened skin. Would you eat that fruit? Working from old photos, they had pieced my fiancée back together in a process that must have been as harrowing as it was painstaking. In fact, they had done so well they had restored her back to her former beauty. Before the cancer had sunk its malignant teeth into her perfect flesh. Her face was flawless. The scar tissue and gnarled skin on the left side had been reconstructed so skillfully she looked the way she had done the day I had met her. And under the demure bosom of her funeral gown, above her folded hands, 2 rounded domes rose where her breasts had once been. She was breathtaking again. And I fell in love with her all over again. But here's the thing, when I dashed upstairs, removing my stuffy suit as I went, I found that the bed was empty. The thumps do seem to be getting closer to where I judged the door to be though. I think I've made a terrible mistake.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse. In the best way.
Working at an amusement park, Dale's bedtime story, by Girl from the Crypt. Dale drove all day and all night. When we finally pulled over at a rest stop, he told me to stay in the truck and went outside to get himself some coffee. I did as he told me. My seat had gotten all soft and weary and my butt hurt from not having stood upright for so long. I almost felt like the car was absorbing me. I leaned over to take a look into the rearview mirror. My hair was matted and my eyes bloodshot. Ever since we had fled from the park, I hadn't been able to shake that feeling of my reflection not being my own. Don't get me wrong, it's no one else's, it just isn't mine. It feels like I've distanced myself from it. Dale had told me not to look into the mirror as much. He had said it wasn't dangerous, but that it would do nothing but drive me crazy. Still, I couldn't stop sneaking quick glances at it. Every time, I was scared to find something new, something that might have changed about the way I look, but there was nothing there yet. I wondered if that was a good or a bad thing. Dale returned a little later with a large cup of coffee for himself and a cupcake for me. He handed it to me and squeezed my shoulder, awkwardly trying to comfort me. "Won't I get crumbs on the seat?" I muttered wearily. "I can't rest like this, Dale. Please, tell me what's going to happen to me. Or where you're taking me. Or anything at all." The blond man let out a soft sigh as he leaned back in his seat. "If it puts your mind at ease, be my guest. But maybe I should start at the beginning. What do you think?" Dale nodded. "The very beginning. How the park came to be in the first place. Would you like to hear that?" His voice was incredibly soft and gentle. Even on his friendlier days, I had never heard him speak like that. He was talking to me like a father would to his frightened child. "Yes," I breathed, curling up in my seat. "Well then. Think of it as a bedtime story. That's how it was taught to me. My mother and father were always very eager to prepare me for the kind of life I would be leading. Me and my siblings too, of course. They would come to our beds every night and just before letting us go to sleep, they would tell us this story. The same one, over and over again. It burned itself into our young minds, it shaped us. Made us wary of what was to come once we would become grown-ups. Sometime during the late 1800s, my family's ancestors decided to settle down on a patch of land. They hailed from, well, basically everywhere. Some of them came from Texas, others from further up north, but they all gathered to mend their bond as distant relatives because they wanted to make money. That might have not been the most honorable goal, but at the time, none of them were wealthy, not by any stretch of the word. However, they soon came up with the idea to turn their land into a fairground since there were many townships in close proximity to the woods. So they started chopping down trees. That's when the nightmare began. The settlers had thought that the woods were not populated and that they didn't belong to anybody. On the paper, they didn't, but the truth looked a bit different. It started with Faith, a younger, at the time pregnant woman who had been traveling with her husband who was part of the clan, suffering a miscarriage. When the first tree fell, she went into labor. It was way too early. She was bound to her bed for 2 entire days, screaming and crying in agony, while the men outside continued to clear the forest. Her child never lived to see the light of day. See, Millie was just 5 when she disappeared, but she had an older half-brother in his early 30s. His name was Colt, and you should probably know that he had a cleft lip. Now, Colt wasn't the type to sit on his ass while his little sister could have been taken God knows where. He was one of those who hailed from Texas, and he was your typical cowboy. He did care a whole lot about manners and etiquette and all that shit. He was a true gentleman. Swearing he would not leave Millie hanging, he set out to look for her. For the next bit, you need to know that Colt was a bit of a craftsman. He was a firearm fanatic, and due to not always having the money to buy ammunition, yes, they were that poor, he would sometimes try to make his own. These handmade bullets would hardly ever fly far. They were pretty much useless, but Colt insisted that they were better than nothing. He made them from iron, you know. I heard he melted old nails and stuff, but whatever. At the time, there were 5 bullets in his revolver, 2 normal ones that were made of lead and 3 of his handmade iron ones. The man on the fallen tree laid Millie down on the ground. She was unconscious, didn't even know what was going on around her. He slowly started to walk towards him. Colt began to shoot at him. He fired 2 shots at him, both hitting him in the stomach. He stopped for a few seconds, appearing to be in pain, but to Colt's shock and astonishment, he just straightened up again and continued coming closer. The wounds where the bullets had sunken into his flesh had vanished. So Colt fired the remaining 3 shots in his revolver. The stranger was just close enough for the iron bullets to find their target. He shot him right in his chest, 3 times, but this time, the stranger let out a cry of agony and fell to the ground. Colt grabbed his sister and ran back home while her kidnapper was still writhing on the ground. Even though there were 3 bullet holes in his chest, he stood upright, and when he spoke, black drool came dripping from his mouth. And in the sharpest of voices, he offered Colt a deal. "We started taking your young ones when you began to destroy our home," he told him, "but we will return them to you. We will even help you with your endeavor to reshape our land. However, we will do so under the one condition that you treat our every wish as your command." Of course, Colt was less than happy with this suggestion, especially since it was so vague it could mean anything. Still, he struck a bargain with the Black-Teeth man, but only after they had worked out a certain set of stakes. You may have already guessed most of them. The Black-Teeth one introduced himself as Warren, and the other 2 that would stay on the surface as Mulberry and Moth. Nowadays, you know Mulberry as the Sugar Plum Fairy and Moth as the Mime. Either way, the creatures lost their names and ability to speak, but while we gained wealth, we also lost our privilege of freedom. We have to give them what they want, no matter what it is. If we don't... Dale paused to swallow audibly. They will not only tear down the park, but probably come for our young ones again. Are they fairies? I asked. That's the thing. We don't know. We believe them to be, but they're not exactly like the ones you'll find in literature. They enjoy mischief and follow certain rules. They even react negatively to most of the same materials. Plus, they are able to change shapes. See, Millie died of some illness in her teen years, and Mulberry took on her outward appearance. I'm not sure how they do it. Maybe they can only change into people who are dead. But there are obvious inconsistencies that set them apart from the traditional fairy folk. My folks and I, we call them the Wild Ones. Warren is also the one who designs the Halloween tasks. I mean, square dancing and his handler humiliating himself, he uses them to mess with us a little. And most importantly, he's the one who is trying to turn you into a not actor. I'm sorry if my account just now sounded like a jumbled mess. You don't even need to care about the contract anymore. I've breached it. I denied Warren his sacrifice. I wasn't sure if I actually wanted to know the answer to the question burning on my tongue, but I asked anyways. Why me? When did he decide? Dale bit his lower lip. He let me know he wanted you last Halloween. But if I'm being honest, you were doomed the moment you walked your happy ass into the park for the first time. It was just the same with Nathan, even though I think he simply had me do that one because he's never liked me all that much. I still remember it like it was yesterday. He came into my office that one morning. There was a framed photo of Nathan and me standing on my desk, and he took it and looked at it for a little while. I was like, "What's going on? What do you want?" And he just pointed at him in the photo and grinned. He took the one thing that made me happy, like, truly happy that day. So, what now? Do we kill him? Part 21, Family.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back out now. Next story's already watching.
Lydia was a good friend of mine from back in the day. She was part of our little group that would hang out. We would all go to the movies, out to eat, celebrate each other's birthdays, and so on. I'm not even sure how all of us started hanging out. At first it was just 2 or 3 of us, and then next thing I know, we're rolling 25 deep to Cheddar's on a random Friday just because we had nothing else to do. It started small, with Naveed asking Lydia out on some dates. They went out a few times, but Lydia wasn't interested in him that way. She told him as much, but he didn't really take the hint. When we went out as a group, he insisted on sitting next to her and would even get a little angry if someone else tried to take that seat. At some point, the two of them had a conversation where she told him it was time for him to back off and stop trying to make something happen that clearly wasn't there. This led to Naveed slowly fading away from the group. The other people tried to keep him involved and even tried to hang out with him separately, but no such luck. Jorge was really good at that. He genuinely loves being around people and spent a lot of time with Naveed, just the two of them hanging out. Of course that stopped at some point too. On Valentine's Day 5 years ago, I got that terrible phone call that Lydia had been murdered. Naveed showed up at her apartment early in the evening with flowers and a stuffed teddy bear. Sunflowers. They were Lydia's favorite. He was waiting for her where she normally parked. She got home and a pretty heated discussion happened between the two of them. From what I heard from one of her neighbors at the funeral, she was trying to get him to understand that the two of them were never going to happen and he was belligerently refusing to accept that fact. He pulled out a gun and shot her in the face right there. She died almost instantly. Lydia P. has joined Snapchat. My stomach dropped. I stared at my screen for what felt like an eternity. My screen dimmed and I looked up and one of my buddies asked if everything was okay. I guess I had turned a little pale as every drop of blood fled from my face and seemed to pool together in my chest. Time seemed at a standstill as I tried to figure out what was happening. "Oh yeah," I finally responded, "I'm fine. Just, the coffee. You know how it messes me up sometimes." I got up and went to the bathroom to relieve myself and splash a little water on my face. The initial shock of seeing her name on my phone wore off and I started to think logically. I tapped on the notification mainly out of a compulsion I have to not have unread notifications in my apps. My dog exhaled in exasperation and jumped off the bed. I heard her scurry to her cage a little bit faster than she normally does when she's ready to sleep in there. She started panting pretty heavily. I turned to my left to look in the direction of her cage. She made this weird whiny/growl noise that I've never really heard her make before and continued to pant as though she had just come in from outside. The bottom left of the camera viewfinder had a weird haze to it. I moved my phone to the left with trepidation to see what sort of madness my phone seemed to detect. My thumb tapped the screen to make sure it didn't go dim again and a small circle popped up to try and focus on whatever this strange haze was in my room. I couldn't help but shiver as my dog's panting got a little more intense and I heard her shuffle around in her cage. That's enough of this, I thought, and went to my friend list to see what was going on with this person who had Lydia's old phone number. Whoever they were, they had already posted a story or two. The small circle next to the name Lydia was black, and I could see some text there. Without knowing why, I tapped it. My screen went black again as the next story started, but only for a second or two. He got out. I threw my phone out of my hands and ran out of my room. I could feel the hot bile in the back of my throat and tried to make it to the bathroom before it erupted out of my mouth. I didn't make it to the toilet and instead retched in my bathroom sink. Red vomit stained my sink and I jumped as I heard my dog begin to furiously bark. I crouched over my sink and tried to stop throwing up. When I glanced my reflection, dimly lit from the small night light I keep in my bathroom, I could tell my eyes were bloodshot from the effort of pushing out the bile. I felt a wave of coldness waft through the bathroom and the vomit suddenly stopped. A couple of coughs and some mouthwash and I realized the coldness of the room was gone. My dog was still barking. I called for her to be quiet and she whimpered and I heard her cage rattle as she found her way back inside of it. When I got back to my room, my phone was face up on the floor, still lit. The same story was on there. A black screen with 3 little words. As I stared down at it, the story changed to a black screen with 2 more words. / Edit, here's the link to part 2, there's a dead girl on Snapchat, lunch with Jorge. Second edit, here's the link to part 3, there's a dead girl on Snapchat, a chilly office. Third edit, here's a link to part 4, there's a dead girl on Snapchat, the realization.
Alright, quick break before our next story. Let's check in with our resident spooky dude. Hey, you ever smile, or is your face just stuck that way?
I smiled once. The sky bled. A child vanished. Never again.
Okay, drama. Maybe next time just try a dad joke.
Knock knock. They never made it to the door.
Wow. Fine, stay moody. Anyways, back to the darkness. This next one's got teeth.
My daughter had been trying to warn me for weeks. I really should have listened, by Mandark. Daddy. I think there's a monster in the attic. It wouldn't matter how much I tell her that it's all just in her head, and that monsters aren't real. If I don't check the attic, she'd wake up screaming and crying just past midnight. Every single time. It's not like her fears were completely baseless, as we had all been hearing odd skittering noises coming from up there at night. Probably rats. No monster is that light-footed. Please, Daddy. Could you go and check? She whispered, afraid that the thing upstairs would eavesdrop and get mad at her request. Is Daddy back from fighting monsters? My wife asked, slight mirth dancing in her tired voice. I shut my eyes and got ready to go to sleep, when I was rudely interrupted by the critters in the attic skittering around like kids hopped up on candy. Fucking bastards with their little rat paws slapping against the wooden flooring of the attic. Babe. You really need to get rid of those rats. I nodded, then realized she couldn't see me. Yeah. Tomorrow. And then that damn skittering again. Fuck. I rubbed my forehead, wiggled my shoulders and opened my eyes. And saw what had been making that noise for all those weeks. Up on the ceiling, I spotted a figure. White, but hidden by the dark. I froze. What the fuck? It shifted. And there was that sound again, like claws scratching wood. My heart beat faster and my body erupted in sweat. What the fuck? What the fuck? I gasped, and the grinning woman turned and crawled out of the room, moving across the ceiling like a fucked up spider woman, before disappearing into the hallway outside. I jumped out of the bed and ran out into the hallway, letting my eyes scan each and every inch of all the walls outside. But there was no one there. It was like she had disappeared. I would have almost believed that I had dreamt it all up if I hadn't noticed the long claw marks on the ceiling and felt my stomach drop. And that's when I finally understood. That for all those weeks that we had been hearing those sounds, it wasn't some rats skittering around. It was that woman, looking down on our sleeping bodies.
You're still tuned to Horror Slop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
Mr. Ferguson, by Theod Catlety. I think the whole street breathed a sigh of relief when we saw the EMTs take a body bag out of the Ferguson house. I was only about 10 or 11 at the time, and it's been a while, so some details of my childhood are lost to time, but I can't forget Mr. Ferguson. There was never a Mrs. Ferguson in the picture, as far as I know. He lived in the house on the corner, the one with the bright yellow shutters and the gorgeous garden out back. The garden didn't make up for the rotten old bastard he was. I wondered once if he was nicer when he was younger, when he didn't have to walk with a cane and could actually get around without help, but my dad set me straight on that one. Mr. Ferguson had always been a terrible person and the neighbor from hell. All day long, Mr. Ferguson would sit on his front porch in his rocking chair, grasping onto his black cane as he stared out on the street. If someone walking their dog even got close to his yard, he'd start spewing threats about what he'd do if the dog took a shit on his lawn. If a kid put even a toe on his property, he'd get up from that chair and start shouting more terrible things. I learned my first cuss words from Mr. Ferguson. He didn't censor his language even among the smallest of ears. And he wasn't all talk. One of my friend's dogs wandered into the Ferguson yard, just sniffing around as beagles do, and Mr. Ferguson beat that dog bloody. The poor thing had anxiety for the rest of its life, and if you so much as passed the Ferguson house with it, the dog would lose its mind. The accident started happening just a week later. I was at my friend Michael's house. We were playing board games when we heard the crash. It was so loud it shook the house and Michael dropped his soda. Root beer spilled onto the carpet as we tried to figure out what that sound was for a second. Then we heard his dad screaming bloody murder. Forgetting completely about the spilled soda, we ran out to the garage where he'd been working on changing the oil in the car. Michael's dad was pinned by the car against the garage door, face white as a sheet as his head lolled to the side. I saw blood splattered against the off-gray color of the metal and I puked while Michael ran inside to call 911. It was an accident, sure, but a weird one. The car just suddenly launched forward as Michael's dad stood in front of it. But there was no one in the garage with him. So yeah. It was just an accident. Mrs. Benson and her sister ended up dying on the way to the hospital. The other woman ended up surviving, but not without some serious electrical burns. Electrocution via hot tub. Just an accident. But there was one more accident we all missed until we returned to the pool to see a little body floating at the top. 3-year-old Maggie had fallen in during the chaos and drowned. His backyard became overgrown by plants. Not over a few weeks, like what happens when a house is uninhabited and there's no one to mow the lawn. The very day after they'd left that house, the backyard was now filled with dandelions, daffodils, lilies, and all sorts of flowers that shouldn't naturally appear in the late summer. 2 other families ended up leaving our neighborhood and their yards had the same fate as the Bensons, completely grown over. A morbid beauty. Fall came and the yards grew brown, but the garden seemed to be even greener. The whispers started about a ghost. A ghost that was such a miserable old bastard in life and was now a nasty poltergeist in death. It all came to a head when a tree was struck by lightning and a large tree limb crashed into our living room. I just tripped while picking up my things and suddenly the roof caved in above me. I was lucky I was on the ground. If I'd been standing, well, I'd probably not be telling you this story. 2 nights later my mom woke me up. She looked grim. When we walked out of the house, I saw everyone on our street was out. Everyone had this same grim look on their face. The deaths, the mutilation, it had forever tarnished our street and we'd all had enough. We walked down the street. I saw several guys walk into Mr. Ferguson's house with mallets and chainsaws, but we kept going with a few of the others. I saw that several of the adults were carrying shovels and containers of lighter fluid. Start digging. Even now the accidents weren't over. A man tripped in the hole and his leg snapped like a twig. He wailed as he was dragged away by a few others before they got right back to digging. Someone else got smacked the face with a shovel and blood coursed down his face from his nose as he just kept on digging. On the back was written Pauline Walters, P. Ferguson, and the father of the bride.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
I work for a veterinarian who never lets a dog die, by your daily devil. I hate to admit it now, but I did like working there. My previous clinics were sterile, fluorescent, utterly depressing. The doctors would mumble they did all they could, bitch over drinks afterwards about shitty cats or dog diarrhea, and while I know it came with the work, it was exhausting to be surrounded by exhaustion, you know. Do you have any children? I inquired casually a night we were packing up. I do regret asking, because he was far too blunt with me. He told me, not breaking his good spirit, that his late wife and him had tried, multiple times, but were multiple times unsuccessful. He reflected for a moment, not in a sadness but a bit more in a yearning, before inquiring about me, myself, in the most polite of ways. And that's how we carried on at Dr. Cowley's, merry as always. The staff was few, but he joked he chose us because we loved dogs more than people. And he was right, to an extent. After nasty breakups I always had my beagle, Samwise, named for Lord of the Rings, which he lets me bring to work. God, I know everyone says their dog is the best dog, but you know. Sam truly is. He just knows. Like a magnet he just attaches to me when I need it the moment I need it, curled against me. I swear he watches shows along with me when I'm in a depressive state, and cures them by bouncing in the flower beds when I eventually have to take them out. You've met this dog before in life, I'm sure you have, so stupid, so perfect. And the good doctor adores him, as do nearly all the visitors. Nearly, being, well, where this story goes, because we have the lions. Do you like dogs more than people? I mumbled to the doctor, after another day of watching the Lions boys drag their dog away. He looked at me as if I had asked something as basic as if the sky were blue. Of course, he replied, and returned to his books. It happened in mid-October, a day gray with rain. The boys had beers with them, and I'd hear them smash in the streets like gunshots as I hurried past with Samwise. And I apologize I cannot go into too much detail as it's painful to be reminded, but as they taunted, as they came near, Samwise treated this as a real threat. I begged him to come with me, to leave them, but the boys came closer and I screamed at them to stop. They did not. With a swift blow from a hockey stick, they smashed it over Samwise's head. He fell with a whimper. They did it again. I screamed as the neighbors came out, the boys laughing as they scampered away, sneakers clanking over their beer bottles. Samwise was in pain, as he whimpered, cried, but I could not let him die. So I took him to Dr. Cowley, who would not let him. I waited for near an hour on the twilight curb, at least it felt that long, a broken mess cradling Samwise. He fell in and out of consciousness, lapping me with his tongue. Until he could barely do that anymore, letting it fall out his mouth as he whimpered. As I whimpered, I wondered if the doctor would be there, if he had forgot, but he came. He came with 2 leathery suitcases, old suitcases, containing his tools. I fumbled for the door lock frantically, and we whisked the dog to his study. Never had I seen him this serious, this determined. Let me work, he told me coldly, a coldness that was new to me. So I did. I wandered around the office, empty. The files and folders were still there, but the candy shop atmosphere felt almost mocking now. Like holding a funeral in a nursery. It felt wrong, and I hated it. Hated as the clock chipped time away, hated as I had nothing to do but wait. So I went in. It was the Lions boys. They were emptied. Emptied from throat to navel, only distinguishable by their clothes as their heads were not there. But inside, there was nothing. No organs, just gutted chicken breast shells still dripping with meat, packed neatly in those 2 little suitcases. The good doctor noticed me, but said nothing. He was tying Samwise with a bow. And Samwise was well. Without a word, he closed the suitcases, zipping them tight, and retreated out back. And I was numb. Still too numb to even care for Samwise, who hopped off the desk as lively as the day he was born, licking me furiously, loving me. Thin hairline stitches nearly unnoticeable, but fresh. I noticed then the books. 2, a few, misplaced. Leather-bound and beautiful, they were out of order, one on his desk. It was opened. It was also hollowed. A storage compartment. Storage for a jar with that smell of formaldehyde creeping from the pages it nestled in. And between it was a child. An almost child, a stillbirth. One of the countless that filled the volumes of the room, a collection of attempts. A section of it had been taken from the tips of its skull, nipped, and I knew where it had gone. I looked down at Samwise, who looked up at me.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
When most people think of demon possession, they picture the classic projectile vomiting, head spinning around variety. While that does happen, it's mostly novice demons who cause that, the vomiting and abnormal behavior being a result of the host's mind rejecting the possession. In reality, most demon possessions are a lot more subtle. They're the little voice that tells you that you're fine to drive when you know you've had too much, or that you can cheat on your wife just this once and no one will ever find out. Or, if you've ever known someone with Alzheimer's who got really mean towards the end, your like is not looking at the work of a demon. But before you can even hop in the line, you've got to go through what basically amounts to demon college. They call it a college, but it's really more like those corporate training seminars they have in America. Satan wanted it to be soul-crushing after all. Most of the introductory stuff is boring, like how to take control of the mind of your victim. That really is the foundation for everything though, because if you can't do that, your victim's mind will kick you right out and you'll be back in hell, at the back of the line with a failure of possession charge on your record. And you definitely don't want that. The advanced stuff is where it gets more interesting, and you get to choose a specialty. Most people go into addiction, because it's one of the easiest majors and you get a reasonable amount of time before your host ODs or just gets used up. Some people go into mental illness, but that can get you institutionalized, and you don't really get to have fun with your new body if you're stuck in a padded room all day. There's also a dictator class. Professor Hitler teaches that one. But not many people take it. Not only is it impractical, Hitler always ends up going on some tangential rant about Jews at the end of class. We get it, Hitler, you don't like Jews. Professor Bundy's class is pretty popular though. There are a lot of wannabe serial killers in hell, and it gives amazing stats if you can pull it off on Earth. 10 or more victims and you're allowed to jump the line and possess another body without going back to hell first. How do you feel, now?
Whew, telling gave me chills. But hey, we're just getting started. The next one's sharper. You'll see.
Working in retail has been hell, with COVID it's been even 10 times more so. But I have bills to pay and mouths to feed. Ain't no rest for the wicked, am I right? I just couldn't afford time off, even though I desperately needed it. Then my friend Natalie told me about this website that might solve my problems. Where you can find someone that matches your appearance and they'll step in to your life for a few days while you recharge. I did it last month and it was exactly what I needed, she said as she passed me a business card with the website name on it. At first it sounded just a little freaky to me. I mean, what are the odds that an agency would even be able to find someone that looks like you in the first place? Still, day in and day out the grind was getting to me. I needed a break. I typed in the code and got a long list of terms and conditions that, like everyone else, I scrolled through. Then I was asked to provide a recent photo or take one with my webcam. Once that part was done, I was asked a few personal details and I adjusted my radius to within 100 miles. Not long after the results came back. I checked out the user's profile, a bit disturbed at how they looked like me in almost every detail, and then shook off the feeling for a second, consenting to the arrangement. "Wow, it's like looking in a mirror," I told the woman. "What's your name anyway?" I asked. "For all intents and purposes I am you," she told me as I gave her a brief tour of the house and explained about my girl's allergies and preferred foods. She was jotting everything down in a notebook and asking a few standard questions. Honestly, nothing made me raise any red flags. Things truly didn't start getting out of whack until I tried to call and check on the kids. Nobody picked up. At first I was miffed, a bit frustrated that they were probably playing video games or watching a movie instead of studying. But I remained calm. I didn't want to spend my few days of freedom fretting about something insignificant. I tried really to not let it bother me, but eventually I just had to see if everything was fine. So I decided instead to call a neighbor. "Nice. It's Mel from next door. Hey, I haven't heard from the kids and dash." But that was as far as I got. A second later she interrupted me with a bizarre statement. That nagging doubt. It had just transformed into a mountainous region of concern. I needed to get home immediately. I cancelled the rest of the vacation and drove all the way in a single night. It wasn't far, but it still felt like it took forever. As I pulled into my driveway, I felt this strange, eerie and sickening feeling starting to overwhelm me. Something was wrong. And each step toward the door felt like impending doom. I jiggled with my keys and tried to open the lock. But it didn't budge. "Can I help you?" the lookalike asked through the thin glass that separated. "Ma'am, this is scaring my daughter. You need to leave," the lookalike instructed. "I live here. I hired you," I shouted at the lookalike. But she looked every bit as frightened as my daughter. Was she trying to make me think I had gone crazy? Was this just some long prank they were trying to pull? "Honey, go upstairs," my lookalike told Chloe. She scampered obediently. Once alone, the lookalike gave me a scornful look. "You have 5 minutes to leave before I contact police," she said. I got a sick feeling that she was dead serious, so I scrambled into my purse and pulled out my phone. She looked me dead in the eye and a soft, sly grin came over her face. Then she closed the door on my face. I felt like shouting at the top of my lungs. This couldn't possibly be happening to me. But it was. I went back to my car and called the police. I was sure that it would be easier to just let them handle this. I figured everything would resolve itself rather quickly, but rather than just tell the lookalike to leave, they insisted we both come down to the station for fingerprints. At the station, I let the lookalike go first for fingerprinting just for that chance. Tia and Chloe had rode up in the police car and were waiting as I got there. I ran up to them and grabbed their hands, talking as fast as I could. "Girls, you need to tell me, is everything okay? What has she done to you? Both of them looked as pale as ghosts. Tia pulled away from me. "Don't touch us," Chloe squealed. An officer rounded the corner and gave me a stern look. What the heck was this woman doing to them where they had forgotten all about me? When I woke, I found out that the woman who was now going by my name wasn't pressing charges. But she did file a restraining order. You can't come within 100 yards of her or her children. I left the office in a mad dash and caught a taxi toward her house. She was outside gardening. "Thank God. You're here," I shouted as I ran toward her. "What?" Natalie asked, shocked by my expression. "You need to help me. That website you told me about. That woman I hired is taking over my life. She even got the girls to believe her. I don't know how. But you're the only one I can turn to." I screamed. Natalie processed everything I said slowly, her brain clicking into gear as I finished my statement. Then, she opened her mouth and that dread overwhelmed me again. "I'm sorry, do I know you?"
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
My Dead Grandpa Unfriended Me on Facebook, by Ramney. My grandmother is still alive. I don't visit her as often as I should, maybe a few times a year. She is not very tech-savvy, but she's on Facebook once or twice a month, and after a few hours of painstakingly guiding her through online banking, she's even managed to start paying her bills online. But other than that, Facebook is about the most complicated computer thing she can handle. I asked my mother, and she checked her own account. She had been unfriended as well. She about had a small meltdown when she called Grandma and she didn't pick up. I live pretty close to my mother, so she came and picked me up, and we drove to Grandmother's house. It's only an hour away. Really, there is no excuse for visiting her as seldom as we do. A few weeks passed. I and Mom both called Grandma once or twice, and everything still seemed normal. But late one night last week I decided to look my grandparents up on Facebook again. The profile pictures had changed. Grandma used to change hers every now and then, and the new ones didn't look unusual, but Grandma said she stopped using Facebook. And there was no reason at all for Grandpa's account to have a new picture. I brought it up with Mother the next day, and she had that same feeling as I did, that something was off. We asked her about Facebook again, and she said she hadn't been on it. When we mentioned the profile pictures changing, she said maybe she'd been on there once or twice. She didn't want to talk about it, so we let it drop. We helped her with a few chores around the house again, but this time my curiosity was stronger, so I made sure I had an excuse to go into her bedroom while she was in the kitchen with Mother, and I turned on her computer. I know all her passwords, because she never changes them, and she has them all written down on a little note next to her laptop. It was a cheap piece of crap the day we bought it for her half a decade ago, but she only uses it for very basic things like writing about her childhood. She lives out in the middle of nowhere, and she grew up in a retirement home in the 1930s, so she knows more about the area and people who used to live there than pretty much anyone. But she had a Tor browser. She's not stupid, my grandma, but she's always been very, very bad at computering, like a lot of old people. So this surprised me. Even my parents probably don't even know what Tor browsers are used for, so my grandma definitely shouldn't. Hell, I don't even know that much. Only time I ever used one was when I was looking into the darknet back in the day, and that was a very brief and shallow visit. My mother's name is Angela, so Angie isn't that strange as a nickname, but nobody calls me Charlie except my grandparents. Charles is my middle name, and most people don't even know I have one. So I was a little bit disturbed that someone was calling me that when talking to my grandmother using her dead husband's account. I took a photo of that as well, then closed the browser and turned her laptop off. My mother and I said our goodbyes and left. Everything about my grandma's behavior seemed normal, and she was sad to see us go like always. But I know for a fact that it couldn't be her who had written that message, since she had been in the kitchen the whole time.
That last one tasted like fear and poor decisions. Let's see what the next bite serves. Hope you're hungry.
The cashier, an acne-riddled kid who looked to be in his late teens or early 20s, looked up from shoving the bag of potato chips, 2 sodas, and a pack of Lucky Strikes into a plastic bag. For a moment, he just stood there, seemingly frozen in mid-action. Then he finally answered. "Yeah, what's up, man?" I let out a barely perceptible sigh. I'd been half afraid that I would be told to take a long walk off a short pier, to put it politely. Feeling relieved, I reached into my back pocket for what was there. You see, I seem to have, well, sort of gotten lost out here. I decided to take a late-night drive, and ended up getting turned around on all these 2-lane back roads. I unfolded the map and set it on the counter so he and I could both see it before continuing. "So, I was hoping you could point out on here roughly where we are. And, more importantly, the way to get back to the main road." There was another long stretch of silence, and then the kid began to laugh, softly at first, and then louder. "Dude, a paper map?" he managed out between wheezes. "Are you for real? What year do you think this is, 1993? For my part, I simply let out a resigned sigh. I'd had a bad feeling I would be getting this sort of reaction from someone his age, and it looked like I'd been proven correct. Can't say I didn't see it coming. He wiped tears from the corners of his eyes and looked at me. "Seriously bro, don't you have GPS in your car or something?" he asked. Immediately, I hooked a thumb over my shoulder, pointing out the glass entry door at the beige sedan sitting at the gas pumps. "Not in a Honda Accord from 1979, I replied simply. As he looked behind me out the door, I could see he wanted to make another quip, probably something about how I should buy a newer car. Thankfully, though, he kept it to himself. Instead, he leaned over the map, and still chuckling softly to himself, began looking at it. A few moments later, he snapped his fingers. "Ha! I still got it," he said proudly, then pushed his finger down near the middle of the map and looked up at me. "We're right about here, roughly 6 or 7 miles outside Placer." I leaned over the counter to see as he drew his finger away. "Here." He nodded, and I pulled a pen out of my pocket, circling the area as a reminder once I left, then examined the map further. "Okay, so it seems I could take more than a few roads to get back to Interstate 5, right?" The kid nodded again, clearly already bored with the unusual interaction by the slightly annoyed look which had begun to cross his face. "Sure," he said simply, then placed my bagged items on top of the map. "That'll be $14.50 for this, and $28.50 for the gas." I let out a small sigh. "Great, Vanessa is likely worrying up a storm about us right now. Me, especially. Ever since we'd started dating 5 years ago, my girlfriend had always been rather apprehensive about my habit of taking long, late-night drives when I couldn't sleep. She always feared I'd get into an accident, either with another car, wrap my Honda around a tree, or hit an animal. Most of the time, I'd come home to find her sitting up waiting for me, worry clearly etched into her beautiful sapphire eyes. I bit my lip slightly. "Hey, you think I should text Vanessa and let her know we're okay?" I asked Craig. I heard him let out a snort. "Honestly, bro. No. I know the woman loves you to death, and I'm happy she cares so much, but she's got to learn you know what you're doing. Plus, you two need your space. It's not healthy how much time you two spend together." I flicked the remnants of the cigarette out the window and let out a snort of my own. "It's called being in love, dude, you should try it sometime," I joked, causing him to let out a laugh. "Nah, thanks, I enjoy being single too much." Shaking my head, I stared out the windshield as the headlights guided our way. I felt a slight sense of unease creep up on me as I watched the two-lane road stretch out before us, the moon and the sky almost completely blocked by the trees over our heads. I hadn't seen another car on the road for 2 hours at least. Well, what did you expect, Derek? You drove into the boonies, there's only ghost towns out here. Why don't you try driving all the way to Idaho next time? Shaking my thoughts away, I fumbled in the center console for a moment before pulling out a mixtape. A bit of music would help me feel better. I pushed it into the car's cassette player and hit play. A moment later, the pounding bass and synths of Dance with the Dead's That House began blasting from the speakers. Craig let out a whoop of excitement. Dude, yes. That's the kind of tunes we need for a drive like this. He rolled down the passenger window, sticking his head out the window to whoop and holler into the night. I shook my head, unable to keep from grinning at his antics. Friggin' goofball. The sound of the car door opening made me turn, seeing Craig step out of the car. Leaving the door open, he immediately came over to me. You have exactly 20 seconds to explain to me what the hell just happened before I lose it, bro, he exclaimed. For a second, I fought to find my voice, then I answered. Dude, I'm not crazy. Someone stepped out of the woods and onto the road. It looked like a chick. I thought I was gonna freaking hit her. I realized I'd been holding in a breath and let it out, trying desperately to get myself to relax. Craig gave me a confused look. You serious, man? I nodded. He pulled the flashlight he'd used to look at the map from his pocket and flicked it on, aiming it first at the tree line on one side of the road, then the other. After doing this a few times, he turned back to me. Well, whoever it was, they're not there anymore, his brow furrowed. But, why would a chick be out here in the middle of nowhere, he muttered, more to himself than me. I still answered. I don't know, man. It's freakin' Josephine County. For as many good people live out here, there's also a bunch of weirdos. I heard my friend let out a snort of laughter and reply, but something had caught my attention. A feeling which had slammed into me with all the weight of a Peterbilt. The feeling of eyes boring into the back of my skull. I spun around, looking back towards the car and seeing nothing there. But the feeling remained, and I didn't like it one bit. Especially when the feeling came again, this time from the direction I'd just been facing a moment ago. Realization dawned on me, and I felt a chill ripple through me, along with the flicker of fear and realization. Oh, shit, I whispered. Craig turned to look at me. What? He asked, seeing the look on my face. He repeated. What? I looked up at him, speaking with a bit of a weak voice. Let's get back in the car, right now. And felt a mixture of confusion and disbelief as the sign for golden flew by again. That's, wah. Craig didn't say anything, but I felt him stiffen in the passenger seat, showing he'd seen it as well. As the streetlight and sign disappeared behind us, a feeling began to creep up on me. Another bolt of electricity shot up my spine as I realized that it was the same feeling I'd had when we'd gotten out of the car. The feeling of eyes on me. My eyes shifted to the blur of trees on either side of the car, but I saw no one. The turnoff for the ghost town approached again. I heard Craig let out another deep breath. Derek, pull over, please, he said simply. His voice was shaking, and as much as I didn't want to stop, I did as he asked, pulling over just before the turn-off. He ripped his seatbelt off, shoving the door open and stepping out. I watched him stride to the front of the car and stand there for a minute. He seemed to start shaking a bit, and I realized just how much this was getting to him. I unbuckled my seatbelt and reached for the door handle, when I glanced at the clock. And froze. The clock was still showing 3 a.m. The hands hadn't moved at all. A feeling of shock washed over me like a wave as I tapped it with my fingers to see if it was merely stuck. But it refused to begin moving again. I replaced the phone in my pocket. I knew I should have been more honest, but I was beginning to feel a little freaked out about the weird situation. I didn't want to worry her any more than necessary, as it would worsen my own mental state. Pushing open the door, I got out and walked around, stopping near the front right headlight. "Dude, you alright?" I asked after a moment. He didn't answer, but happily, he seemed to have stopped shaking. I repeated my question. When he didn't answer my second and third calls, I began to feel a new sensation creep up on me. A potent mixture of dread and fear. "Craig. Dude, you're creeping me the fuck out. Please say something." He finally turned to look at me, and in the semi-glow of the headlights, I saw his face had gone a bit pale. He raised a finger and pointed, saying only a single word. "Look." My eyes followed where he had gestured. And I began to feel like I was standing under a freezing cold waterfall. The cigarette dangling from my lips fell from my mouth to the ground. Standing about 50 feet away, just inside the tree lean, was a figure. It was drenched in gloom, but, with a gasp, I realized it was the same woman who'd nearly caused me to wreck. "Oh, fuck me sideways, man." I swallowed, finding my voice. We should get back in the car, Craig," he nodded. "I think you might be right," he answered, his voice wavering. Not taking our eyes off the figure, we slowly backed up until we reached our respective doors and climbed in. I didn't even bother pulling my seatbelt on. I just jammed the gear shifter into first and floored it. Dirt and gravel kicked out behind us, and the car shot forward onto the road. This time, I didn't let up on the gas. I kept my foot hard down, the engine beginning to roar as I shifted into third and fourth. The speedometer reached 60 as I shifted into fifth gear, the feeling of being watched intensifying with each passing second. I prayed that I would see something, anything ahead of us. An intersection. A house. A freaking out-of-use payphone, for fuck's sake. Fear coursed through every vein in my body. Not at his question, but at his voice. It was different. Gone was the fear and tension it had held not even a minute ago. Now, he just sounded calm. No, not simply calm. I couldn't understand why, but the way his tone was, it almost made me feel like he was smiling. Another shiver cascaded up my spine as I finally forced myself to answer, my mouth dry as cotton. "What?" He answered as we began to fly under the streetlight. "Are you scared?" For whatever reason, the question made me turn to look at him, just as the light whizzed over us. For a split second, the car's interior became illuminated again. My eyes locked with his. Darkness. Then they told me how I'd been found. How a father and son who owned a gas station nearby had been out driving, and had come across first my destroyed Honda, which had wrapped itself around a tree, and then, lying unconscious in the grassy ditch, me. They didn't say who they'd been. But I had a fair idea. The son at least, anyways. That night was 3 months ago. I've been at home, resting and healing this entire time. It's given me plenty of time to think. Plenty of time to process everything. I try not to think about that night. About any of it. I feel like I'll go insane if I do. Especially after the police told me that they found nobody else at the scene of the wreck. Only the passenger door hanging open. As I type this out, I feel the threads of my sanity begin to pull away from each other, threatening to split. Remembering the woman's face, indeed a ghost, as it flashed in the headlights. The look of horror plastered there as she frantically waved at me to get my attention. The same look the others must have had. Remembering turning to look at Craig as the light flickered over, and seeing the smile on his face. A smile wider than any human's could possibly be, filled with shark-like teeth as black eyes stared hungrily at me, the same smile the kid told me he'd been flashed as I pulled away. But mostly, I remember the single line of text Vanessa sent me. What caused me to rack my brain, trying frantically to recall my friendship with the figure sitting opposite me, and horror filling me as I realized I couldn't think of one single memory. What will keep me from ever taking late-night drives again? The 3 words that will remain burned into my memory forever.
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
I'm a psychologist, and I just found some therapy notes that I don't remember writing. They outline some pretty disturbing stuff, by signed seal delivered. I'm afraid I may sound foolish, or maybe insane. I'm going to share some therapy session notes that I found on my laptop, session notes I have no memory of writing. I'll anonymize the contents, of course, and normally, I would never violate confidentiality this way. But I'm truly scared now, and I just want this out there in case anything should happen. Note that these are my very rough drafts of notes, the kind I type down really quickly in the short 10 minutes I have between sessions, for me to edit later, before I upload them onto the secured system. They also contain some of my own random thoughts. I have tried to flesh them out a little so they make sense, and explain some terms used, but I'm not really in the mood to do up proper notes, so do pardon me. Client seeking individual counseling for couples difficulties. Partner unavailable to join therapy. Discussed confidentiality issues and conducted psychoeducation on how therapy works. Background: client in relationship since 2009. Client devoted and fully committed for the first 6 years. Then, partner demanded that the client sacrifice something important to the client, unwilling to share what it was yet. Client eventually obliged, but relationship soured since then. Client is completely dependent on partner for living, shelter, finances, food, etc. Feelings of hopelessness, emptiness, self-hatred and low moods. Risk assessment conducted, frequent thoughts of ending existence since 2015. No current intention or plan due to belief that it would not work. Intention rated 0, intensity of thoughts rated 8. Adamant that risk assessment was unnecessary as there was no way he could end his life. Homework, identity therapy goals. Additional notes: client extremely nervous whenever asked to share more information. Highly reticent. Therapy goals: client shared that his long-term goal was to be safely free of the relationship. His mid-term goal was to overcome his fear and sense of helplessness, to be able to achieve his LT goal. Set the following short-term goals: uncover underlying core fears, examine beliefs of helplessness, and evidence for and against these beliefs. Client prioritized identifying fears as goal to work on first. Use downward arrow, therapeutic technique that uses Socratic questioning to attempt to uncover underlying reasons. Identified the following core fears: death, pain, loss of identity, lack of control, helplessness/powerlessness, worthlessness, abandonment. Attempted but unable to complete fear cycle exercise. This exercise where one explores the negative cycle of client's core fears, client's reactions, core fears of partner, activated partner's reactions, as client was unwilling to discuss reactions of himself or partner. Homework: read article given on importance of being open in therapy. Client unwilling to share more about his situation despite multiple approaches. Used motivational interviewing, unsuccessful. Client identified the core belief of powerlessness as the key belief he wanted to address. Discussed evidence for and against his belief of, I am powerless, but unable to complete as client unwilling to share much information. Homework: to examine and list down the evidence client has that is for and against his belief of, I am powerless. Client need not share what he wrote with me. July 25, 2020, 10 o'clock. Session 8 with DW. Observations: same as previous. Client's eyes are bloodshot, he is paler than before. Client shared that he was willing to share more information, but that there would be consequences. Client was unconvinced by reassurance of confidentiality. Client's sharing. Client believes he is in a relationship with a demon. He had devoted himself to worshipping this particular demon in 2009 after obtaining help from demon. Note, delusion is strong, deeply entrenched. According to client, demon made him sacrifice his wife in 2015 in a ritual. Client had continued to serve the demon, but was resentful and bitter ever since. Demon was ungrateful and cruel. Client attempted to kill himself, but he found that the act of sacrificing his wife in ritual had bound his life to the demons, and he could not kill himself. Note, work on helping client manage his delusions and hallucinations, while using ACT sessions to keep him engaged. Check in to assess if wife's murder is part of delusion. Client requested that the next few sessions be undocumented. He was adamant about it, threatened to quit therapy otherwise. Came to verbal contract to not note down future sessions, after outlining pitfalls and ethical issues of not keeping session notes. December 19, 2020. Session 29. When I'd first read these notes last week, I had tried to think back to the dates mentioned, all those Saturday mornings. I couldn't, for the life of me, remember what I could have been doing on those days. But I figured, it was just typical forgetfulness. I had put it aside after repeatedly reassuring myself that it was a prank. And what really brought fear to my heart, was the short message appended to DW's appointment request.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
The dark web. The name itself is a meme. It's become the boomer boogeyman, the back alley of the internet where you go to get your kidneys harvested and sold off to a billionaire's all-you-can torture buffet. It's the skeezy part of town. The no-man's land of the digital world, chock full of society's most vile scum. It's also pretty boring. See, the dark web really isn't that much different than the surface web. Sure, it has a cooler name and better privacy, but most people use it for the same shit. Social media? Check. Shopping? Check. Pirating movies? Duh. Did you know Facebook exists on the dark web? You do now. Ridiculous, right? I told them they were paranoid. To prove them wrong, I even downloaded the Tor browser and uninstalled Chrome. There's nothing to fear on the dark web, I said, so long as you've got half a brain's worth of sense in you. Now I wish I could take it all back. Most were fairly vanilla. Some free textbooks here, a bit of hacked video games there. I scrolled down through the responses until I found one buried beneath the others. It had just a single upvote. Monster Call 143D1.onion. The website was plain, mostly white text on a black background. Across the top was a banner emblazoned with the words "Call your monsters." I cracked a grin. It was kind of cute, in an edgelord, emo kid sort of way. I practically licked my lips. This was the juicy bit. The website gave me a drop-down list of selectable options based on modifiable body parts. The mouth, for instance, had fangs, broken teeth, no mouth, multiple mouths, and too many teeth. I thought the idea of too many teeth sounded ridiculous enough to be awesome, so I picked that and went down the list and selected the rest of the monster's attributes, including its body type, its subspecies, and finally its power. Alright, I decided, I'm game. I went downstairs and grabbed a knife from the kitchen drawer and headed back up to my room. Holding my hand up with a coy grin, I pricked my thumb with the tip of the blade. Order complete. Delivery in progress. I sipped my beer, wondering how Jared would react to my spooky surprise landing on his doorstep tomorrow. I really hoped they included the blood sacrifice bit. Jared and his wife, Alyssa, both hated blood, so they'd never let me live it down, and that was exactly what I wanted. Already? That didn't make any sense. How did they manage to create my order and ship it across the country, all in the span of 5 minutes? Defeated, I decided that was enough dark web shopping for one night and time to pack it in. I closed my laptop, brushed my teeth, and hopped into bed. I stared at it, wondering who would be messaging me at this hour. Jared, maybe? He was just as drunk as I was and probably high as a kite by now too. I picked it up and saw one new email from MoNSTRCLL. Odd. I never gave them my email address. Order delivered. I sat up, my tiredness vanishing in a tidal wave of what the fuck. The video was dimly lit, and the way it bobbed up and down looked like it was being recorded off of somebody's cell phone. Jared's small, 2-bedroom home was there in all of its suburban glory. Something about the video felt off, though. Wrong. The video neared the house, the footsteps going slowly. In the silence of the night, I heard the person behind the camera breathing. They sounded frightened. Scared. Why? Lights went on inside the house, painting the windows in a dull yellow glow. I squinted, seeing dark shapes darting behind the curtains. Terrence, sup dude, you get my special delivery? Haha. Jared, smithing. Jared, inside the house. It stood 8 feet tall, with large bat wings flared out behind it, and 4 crooked, muscular arms clenching in and out of fists. The person behind the camera stumbled backward, muttering something incoherent. The creature swiveled its head toward them. The video crashed, tumbling in a blur of pixels. A man's voice shouted for help, and then something heavy crunched, and his voice died with a wheeze. Another shriek filled the night, and a shadow appeared, gazing down toward the discard cell phone. It had 4 arms, a pair of wings, and a mouth filled with rows and rows of teeth. I put my phone down, horrified. It had to have been a joke. There simply was no way that had actually happened. It couldn't have. It was too gruesome, too violent. That was digital effects all the way. It had to be. They were great at those these days. My heart slammed in my chest. What happened? I asked. I told myself to relax, that there was nothing to worry about. Monsters didn't exist. I knew that. My jaw hung limp, my hand trembling as I held the phone to my ear. A terrible coincidence. That's all it was. A terrible, horrible coincidence. Mutilated? I said in a small voice. Oh my God. Jesus. According to the police, the psychopath that broke in gnawed their faces off. Vomit rose in my stomach. I forced it down. Oh Christ, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I ran a hand through my hair, gripping it forcefully and pulling on it, praying the pain would wake me from this nightmare. Please, Roger, let me handle the funeral preparations. You and Charlene should take this time to grieve, you. That's the thing, Roger said, his voice tremoring with emotion. There won't be a funeral. What? And number X200B. Boo. And number X200B. More. And number X200B. TCC.
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
There were 2 types of people at Ashbourne Intermediate School, those who knew about the murder club and those who didn't. I think you'd like it, actually. It's a collection of murder mysteries. I've graduated from mysteries, I said, picking up my slice of pizza. I took a comically savage bite of my pizza and flashed Elliot a tomato-stained grin. Real murder. Elliot laughed. I laughed with him. Equals 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 equals. Being careful not to be caught by the hall monitor, I went down into the basement level and made my way over to the broom closet, where the murder club was famously rumored to meet. I folded the note and slipped it halfway through the gap under the door. I felt my heart beat a little bit faster as I hurried back up the stairs and out onto the soccer field. Equals 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 equals. The only way to join the club is to kill one of us. Once you were among those who knew about the murder club, it was fairly easy enough to deduce who was in it, because they mysteriously went missing during the Tuesday and Thursday club periods and the teachers could never find them. On Monday I came to school with a packet of rat poison in my backpack. Not the stuff that came in pellets, but the pure, white powder that was dangerous to even breathe around. During lunch I dumped the whole packet into a cup of water and swapped the cup with Andy's while he was looking away. Stupid kid, I thought to myself. It was like he didn't know I was coming after him. Nothing, I said quickly. I looked back to him, and noticed the bruises on his cheek. What's that? Elliot, you can't keep letting people bully you. Elliot looked at me expectantly, with his glasses sitting crooked on his crookedly heeled nose. There wasn't anything I could tell him, but in my head I told him to wait. Just wait until I was in the murder club. Fortunately, before the silence between us grew too long, the bustle of the lunchroom was interrupted by gagging, and a loud clatter, and cries of alarm. But the body on the floor wasn't Andy Bale. It was the kid who always sat next to him, Genevieve something or other, with her blonde curls splayed out on the lunchroom floor in a smear of red vomit. I swallowed. But then, as if reading my thoughts, Andy held up his cup, still full to the brim. I looked at Genevieve's tray. She hadn't gotten a cup of water for herself, just a carton of milk that was now on the floor. Genevieve convulsed on the floor, coughing out blood-stained milk. Andy took a long drink from his cup. Then he looked back at me, smiled, and took a small flourishing bow like a magician after his act. Equals 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 equals. As far as I could tell, all the other students' parents did the same. Nobody ever left Ashbourne. Not the students, not even the teachers. Some whispered that it was a curse. We appreciate your service. Please try again. Equals 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 equals. On Monday, I waited in anticipation in the garden shed, sweaty hands clasped around the handles of a long, rusted pair of gardening shears. Soon I began to hear footsteps coming down the gravel path. I flattened myself against the wall and tried to calm my breathing. The door creaked open. As soon as I registered Jasmine's brown hair and freckles, I lunged with all my might and, just as she turned around in surprise, sank the blades of the shears 6 inches into her stomach. Blood bubbled onto the dusty floor of the shed. Jasmine's eyes flitted up to me. I yanked out the shears, and with one last cough, Jasmine slumped forward dead. The shed was filled with the musty scent of blood. I wiped the shears with a rag used for drying the gardening tools and grabbed a shovel so that I could bury both. When I opened the door to leave the shed, I stumbled back as I realized someone was waiting just outside. Kevin Fisher from the field hockey team lay dead on the floor, blood and guts spilling out of his stomach. His wide eyes, frozen in terror, stared back up at me. I swallowed hard and slowly turned my head to look back at Jasmine. In a week's time, school had reopened again. But I couldn't stop. Not anymore. I told myself it was all for Elliot, that as a member of the murder club I could steer the club toward targeting his bullies until my little brother was finally free. A heroic cause. But more than anything now, I just wanted to take that smug grin off of Andy Bale and Jasmine McCartney's faces. Not just that, I would give them a show. At the end of the week was the school play, a production of the first 3 acts of Julius Caesar. I planned to kill the third and final member of the murder club there. I planned my moves much more carefully this time, determined not to give away where and how I had decided to strike. I snuck in and out of the backstage days before the performance, avoiding the stage crew and studying the props. The daggers the senators would use to stab Caesar were designed like the classic toy used for pranks, with faux aluminum blades that retracted into the hilt when the wielder stabbed them into someone. With a few drops of superglue and a tiny bit of sharpening, the props easily became weapons enough to pierce through flesh. The 2-hour-long play was an agonizing wait. I kept glancing at Elliot, seated near the front with his fellow 6th graders. Part of my conscience seemed to come back from the cold and calculating days, as I thought about my little brother having to witness the slow painful death I had planned for Nico Harvey. My heart beat faster and faster, and a sickening feeling settled in my gut. But by the time I was desperately wishing I could back out, it was already too late. Nico Harvey, regal and beautiful in his crimson cape and laurel crown, walked onto the stage between the cardboard pillars of the Senate for the final scene. The waiting senators unsheathed their daggers, and one by one, stabbed them swiftly into Nico's chest. Nico twitched silently on the blood-stained floorboards of the stage. The 23 senators watched him without a word until his convulsions stopped and he finally fell still. People and senators, be not affrighted. Fly not. Stand still. Ambition's debt is paid. The lights flared back on, illuminating the faces of the crowd, some teary-eyed, some delighted, some just glad the boredom of listening to Shakespeare was over. The curtains opened, and the actors walked onto the spotless clean stage and began to take their bows. The rest of the school day went by in a nauseating blur. Elliot raved on the bus ride home about how amazing the play had been, and how good the actors were. He never once acknowledged the blood and the daggers, like nothing unusual had ever happened. He asked me if something was wrong, but I couldn't tell him what. When I arrived home, I refused the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches our parents had made us and drifted up to my room. I pulled off my shirt and opened the closet to get a change of clothes, and when I saw what was inside I choked back a scream. Travis Hemington, still dressed in his costume as Brutus the Traitor, was limply crumpled on the floor of my closet. His chest and sides were torn up into messy wounds, as if he had been stabbed over and over. Smeared on the back wall was a message written in blood. "We appreciate your service. Please try again." Some hours must have passed until I fell asleep. I didn't even remember getting into bed, but when I woke up I was underneath my covers. It was still dark, maybe 3 or 4 a.m. And I was hearing sounds. "We appreciate your service," someone whispered. "Please try again." I bolted upright, already shaking. "Who's there?" The voice giggled. I felt myself go pale. Standing at the foot of my bed were 3 figures, with 3 sets of teeth that glowed in the moonlight as they grinned down at me. I gasped. What did you do to him?" "Nothing," she said. "Nothing, yet." "What do you want from me?" "No. No, please, just leave me alone." "Don't touch him," I cried. Jasmine beamed. So you'll try again? And besides, Nico mused. You might finally get one of us someday. You might kill one of us, once and for all. And when that happens, who knows? Maybe then you'll finally learn the real secrets of our club. There were 3 types of people at Ashbourne Intermediate School, those who knew about the murder club, those who didn't, and me. Travis Hemington's body was gone without a trace in the morning. Even the stain on the carpet had vanished, as if it had never been there at all. Elliot complained about some bad dreams he had as the school bus rumbled over dirt roads. I nodded absently. She was really pretty, Elliot sighed. Do you think she would talk to me if I said hello? We appreciate your service. Please try again. Please try again. I pressed my hand onto my pocket, feeling the weight of the switchblade I had taken from my father's drawer. Yeah, I said meekly. I have a feeling she likes you, already.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
Now that God has revealed himself, none of us are allowed to die, by World Away Tweety. It was a Thursday when God revealed himself to all of humanity. I have returned, the voice said. And it was clear. The feeling in our hearts was certain. The Lord was real, and he was here. Some knew immediately, when their loved ones in hospice care saw remarkable turnarounds in health. Others missed the memo until mass consensus had been established, when scientists and statisticians alike revealed that by every known metric, natural disasters, car crashes, heart attacks, the number of daily reported deaths had plummeted from an average of 160,000 to 0. Life went on, and as it did, I started hearing whispers of what worship was. Depending on who you talked to, online or at the water cooler, you'd hear a different rumor, a different interpretation. 7 o'clock, after dinner, Mom got up from her seat in the living room, got ready, donned her coat, stepped towards the shoe rack. Where you heading, hon? My father asked her. I've been summoned. The Lord has summoned me for worship. Did you, need a ride? My dad asked confusedly. He didn't return until the next evening. We rushed downstairs when we heard the front door open, hoping we'd catch both parents entering. Instead, it was just him, disheveled, weary, a muted expression on his face. She's standing in a field, he said. Then, there are other people there, too. 4 months passed since Mom was first called to worship. During that time, we learned something more about God's interventions. The new commandments, as I termed them in my brain, were panning out as the following. 1. Thou shalt not die, via disease, natural disasters, etc. 2. Thou shalt be called to worship at a random time. Now I'll admit neither of those are as catchy as the OG commandments. This is, after all, not the official word of the Lord, merely just my reading of the tea leaves. Commandment 3 came to me in a dream. Kidding, it came to me in a YouTube video. The guy getting his ass handed to him stood up also. And then both of them just walked. Single file, empty expressions on their faces. Manchurian candidate shit. 3. If thou attempt to kill another, thou shalt immediately be summoned to worship. The spot she had journeyed to was an hour's drive from home, so she must have trekked for hours that first night. It was my first time seeing her since she'd been gone. I had mentally convinced myself that there was no need for me to come out here. After all, she'd be coming home, any day now. To my surprise, despite her fixed posture and eyes tilted up, her mouth moved. "Hi, sweetheart." She wasn't totally being herself. "Mom, are you able to move?" The softness in her tone didn't change, but it did seem like she was imbuing her words with some kind of subtext. Trying to say something more. "I can't, love." And then, enunciated even clearer, "I think you should go home. Perhaps before you're forced to stay too." Home. Get going now, dear. But no one was really gone. Mom hadn't left. Worship would be over soon, it had to be. Maybe another couple of weeks, couple months at most, and then she'd be home, and the Lord would call someone else to take her place. Commandment 4 became common knowledge a year later. The amount of folks called to worship had steadily gone up during this time. This was global, of course, so anyone curious could at any time look up a live stream of the designated worship areas around the world to see people standing uniformly, frozen, perfectly spaced, in parks, beaches, city squares, you name it. Every town, every city had its place. I tried my best to keep my thoughts pure. I couldn't help but assume that thoughts of blasphemy contained within the 17 or so centimeters of my brain were fair game for our omnipotent ruler to scrutinize. It was a nice fantasy though, the idea that there might be a spot, a street corner without God's CCTV camera. Somewhere you could just be you without fear that your insubordination would expedite the ticket to your special place on God's canvas. I'd jolt awake in my bed, sweating. Praying, funny as it were, that I still had executive function. That, and the little moments where I'd feel a random twitch or spasm in my leg, those were the killers. My brother and I never got a chance to see him exit stage left into the crowd. The day that he was called upon, he was out and about. I believe he'd gone to see the mechanic, and maybe had a physio appointment on the docket afterwards too. That didn't matter now. We held out hope until the third day of him being gone. The field where Mom stood was full now, and at this point our city had quite a few landmarks for congregation. My brother and I took turns visiting these different areas to see if we could maybe catch our dad standing amongst the crowd. No luck. Or when I'd spot people on the bridge, walking alongside the cars, albeit robotically. And I'd wonder if I was just being a cynic, or if maybe some of the pedestrians strolling alongside traffic had originally arrived with ulterior motives. With my brother's mistake, it all became clear. "Marcus?" I asked. 2. "Marcus," I said again. He ignored me. "I don't, listen, I'm, only asking out of curiosity." I tried not to sign my own release form with my words. "Are you able to control your body at all? Even a little bit? If you were feeling the call, it would be clear to you too, and now I need to go." He grabbed his shoes. 70% of the world after all, give or take, was in the worship state now. There were two moments that stuck with me, moments that really captured the spirit of things. The fire fizzled as soon as it reached him. The blade froze in midair. The explosion never happened, thank goodness, really, as the camera footage eventually discovered and uploaded was gold, and then our friend got up from his seat, still dripping and flammable, and walked out of frame. The other was the video of that big streamer who kept faking that he'd been summoned while live on Twitch. His face would go blank, he'd get up from his seat, and he'd mechanically step out of his room. He'd done the fake out so many times, that when it was the real thing, chat was in denial for hours. People still worked, still clung to routine, but it was pretty fruitless. I'd see street preachers with a megaphone, telling us that our time was soon, like, no shit, my guy. Apple, despite most of their workforce having clocked out permanently, still managed to come out with new products somehow. Streaming was mainly reruns, however. Probably hard to commit to a full season of material when your director, lead actor, lead writer, and everyone else on set could step out at a moment's notice and never come back. It had been 2 years. His was the hardest one for me. After all, I knew deep down he wouldn't have wanted me to pity him. But holy shit did I. How is it? I asked again. I'm in worship, he said. And it'll probably be my time soon too, I said. Help me prepare. Again, he said nothing. There's a feeling in my chest, a sureness. This isn't going to stop. And then I had to go. I think I heard him say, please stay, I need conversation, or maybe I imagined it, or maybe I heard it bang on clear but I didn't want to think about it because it made me feel like shit. /////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////////// It was dumb luck, pure and simple. Dumb luck that I hadn't been called upon yet. My soft research started the moment Dad disappeared, but you can be damn sure it escalated after the conversation with my brother. The new constants, immortality and worship. But, desperate times and all that nonsense. I stepped inside, and then I felt it. The lack of the feeling of the Lord in my chest. It felt like my bond with the Creator had been severed. The interior stretched quite long. I took a seat in the pews. There were a few others seated in the rows. They looked like they'd been waiting for quite some time. After a little while, a man came out on the stage. "Just gonna be a couple more hours, but he should be seeing to all of you soon," he said. And sure enough, Thomas got up from his seat, and followed the man to the back. Tick. 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 "That's me," her hand shot up. "That's me," and off she went to the back. And then the sun was going down. "I couldn't come back tomorrow." "To the back," he said, and I followed him there, a rather confusing and twisting pathway past closed doors, boxes, mess, and hallways until we got there. 2. I entered the booth. Blood. What a novel sight. "Take a seat, don't worry about the dried, you know, it's fine. You'll be good." "Sit," said who I presumed was the priest sitting on the other side of the partition. I did as he requested. "Reverend Lucian?" I asked. I continued, "I haven't really done this confessional thing before, but I guess, are you supposed to ask me to confess something?" "Yes. Please confess whatever is on your mind." I heard the sound of something being cleaned by a cloth, followed by a deliberate, echoing snap. Was he eating? I heard the echo of another bite. Jesus, a little rude man. But yeah, not sure if I wanna stand in a field for 100 years, in worship, I guess. His little what now? Heaven on earth. Eternity. That was always the plan. For all of you to become one with the Lord for the rest of time. Course he wanted to show up when there was the most people, right? He said, crunching. Like, probably, he stifled a laugh, probably less exciting when it's fucking cavemen, right? Billions of people. Or 10,000 cavemen. Which would you choose? Right, I said, gathering, and I mean no, I guess that was it. It said you have a surefire solution. On your ad. Yeah, he said. I can kill you. Yeah. Right here. Right now. Course, if you need time to think about it, it's a no. And if you step out of the church, God will summon you right then and there to be a part of the flock. I gagged, my vision blurring as I tried to focus on the man who delivered the blow. The man who had a bloody knife in one hand, half-eaten apple in the other. "You're welcome," I think I heard him say.
You're still tuned to Horror Slop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
I train human remains detection dogs. I Can't Work in the Field Anymore, by Nyla Cotter. My partner and I had worked together since we were 18, and always searched together. If he gave me a ring at 3 a.m., I knew he'd meet me at the curb so he could load his dogs in my truck and give me a coffee so we could go have another weird night. I work in mid-Missouri, where we only have one new FEMA SAR task force, so we got a lot of calls. I live near the Ozarks and St. Louis, so we got some odd ones. I worked a lot of urban crime scenes and wilderness searches, so my dogs became pretty diversified. One series of search assignments made me decide to stop working in the field. I still train dogs and sell them to other task forces, and I work as a behaviorist for an animal shelter now, but I will never work another active search site. Okay, enough background. 4 days later, again. Found in a campground, without our assistance. I was having nightmares. My dogs and I were constantly running drills. I had never handled anything like this before. I was 27 years old, and inexperienced. I was afraid I would mess something up. This was getting so insane. What if I contaminated a crime scene? What if we did something wrong? What if we didn't do our job fast enough, and put other people in danger? When the next call came, I was already awake. I met my partner at the curb at 11 p.m., and he loaded his dogs in the truck and gave me my usual coffee. I got a call in through my radio. My partner told me he had a live track, and tagged his GPS. He was half a mile from my location, deeper into the woods. He told me to come to his location. No. I radio him back. I found the target. He is not following the target. Come back. No. Turn around. I found the target. You are not following the target. My dogs are well trained, reliable, and quite good at recovering human remains. Unfortunately, I won't work in the field again after my final search and recovery assignment, which I received the next morning. No coffee. Edit. If you'd like to hear a narration of this story, check out Kyra the Doll on YouTube. She's fighting the good fight and putting out good content.
Still here? Aw, look at you. Brave little meatbag. Too late to back down now. Next story's already watching.
I'm deaf and didn't realize there were strange sounds coming from my house, by not applicable. As you may have gathered from the title, the problem with this is it's impossible for me to tell if that silence is empty or not. I heard something downstairs. Can you go check? A smarter man than me would have noped the fuck out of there once that happened, but I rationalized it away, and after a few weeks, I had all but forgotten about that incident. It took a while, but I finally convinced them to uncuff me so I could put my hearing aids back in. What they told me after I got them in chills me to this day. That was when I finally started getting scared. I decided to leave my hearing aids in from now on. 3 days later, while I was making myself a nutritious dinner of ramen noodles, it finally happened. I heard footsteps upstairs. It sounded like someone was running back and forth between rooms. Even then, I tried to rationalize it away. I told myself it was probably the house making noise. I was always reading in books that houses made noise, so that was probably normal house sounds that I never noticed before on account of being deaf. Then the toilet flushed and I heard more running footsteps. I got a kitchen knife and went upstairs as quietly as possible. Yes, my dumbass probably should have called the police, but what if they didn't find anything like last time?
Something's still listening, and it wants more. Next story. Just don't say its name.
I'd only been gone for about 15 minutes, sneaking in a coffee break in the early morning hours. By the time I returned, panic had spread through the office like wildfire. "James, what's going on?" I asked, more confused than worried. "The CDC, they've locked us in. Apparently someone's infected," he half asked, half stated. Through the plastic, we could see armed guards patrolling the building. All dressed in black uniforms and gas masks. "They can't just lock us in here without warning. Did you call the police?" I asked. He nodded. "Yeah, all calls just get directed to their office." "Fuck, man, my wife is sick at home, I can't get stuck here." While we speculated, our supervisor called us into the meeting room. "But if you're feeling sick, or see anyone displaying symptoms, please let us know." What followed was a barrage of questions and protests. But it was a fruitless effort. Regardless of how much we wanted out, we couldn't even get through the doors, much less fight an army. They started counting heads, and quickly realized that one of us had gone missing. "Has anyone seen Leonard?" our boss asked. "He went to take a leak, an hour ago," James said. I'll go check on him." I joined him, and the two of us went to check on Leonard. As we opened the bathroom door, we were immediately hit with a metallic stench. I almost puked as I saw him, sitting in pool of his own blood, clutching onto a kitchen knife. "Worms?" James asked. At a first glance, that's what they looked like. But, after a minute, it dawned on me that the things Leonard had cut out were his own veins. We couldn't save her in time. One by one, the office workers fell to insanity. Each begging to remove the alleged worms inside them. We tied down those we could, but with people constantly falling victim to the same fate, we could do little but hide ourselves away. From our office, we witnessed the sick cut their own flesh away. They tore their arteries, tendons and nerves out, quickly dying from blood loss. All the while, we just watched. By the next morning, more than half the staff had succumbed to self-sustained wounds. Not a single one of us dared interrupt, lest we ourselves get infected with the psychosis. There's no cure, but the CDC promised to let us out, once the infection had been contained. At least they're letting us contact our loved ones. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll make it out of here. Just an hour ago, my skin started itching. At first, I just ignored it, but then I felt the things crawling under my skin. It hurts, and I can't ignore it any longer. I need to get these things out of me, no matter what it takes.
Still with us? Good. That last one was just the warm-up. Let's go deeper.
That's exactly what I was thinking when I got a portable radio last Christmas, but of course I was too nice to say it. "Thank you so much," I said slowly, trying to think of something to add. "You know I like music." She took a breath. I pulled out my phone and started recording, in case I needed to reference the audio later. I did end up listening to it, several times in fact, but nothing is clearer for me. I referenced it to write this too, to make sure I got everything right that she said. Edit, update. The girl I heard made a post here.
You're still tuned to Horror Slop. Frequency unknown. Stories endless. Let's spin the next nightmare.
When I was a kid, my family took a vow of silence. It was the last time I ever spoke to them, by Mr. Frontenac. My parents were the type of people who seemed so perfect that you couldn't help but wonder what kind of skeletons they had in their closet. They spent their Saturdays in soup kitchens, Sundays in church service, and weeknights delivering meals on wheels. You would think there had to be something more. Humans weren't endlessly kind, and everyone had their sins and secrets. I wasn't the opposite of my parents. I was no devil, but I wasn't a great kid either. I acted out a lot after I was diagnosed with Stargardt disease, a form of juvenile macular degeneration. In short, I was mostly and legally blind. It's not terrible. I listen to audiobooks, write with talk-to-text, and believe it or not, live a pretty normal life. She laughed and bent to kiss my head. My son's so funny. They didn't ask for money. They're signing people up for a vow of silence. How long would it be? I asked nervously. Why couldn't I have a sister that ruffled my hair and called me twerp like in the cartoons? Why did everyone in my family have to be so much better people than me? That evening just before dark, I dangled my feet off the dock while I had watched what I could of the sunset. If it could just stay like this, I thought. If my vision didn't get any worse, I could still see some beauty in the world. I came inside to my parents and Julie putting on their shoes. Jamie, there you are, my dad came over and plucked something out of my hair. We'll be back in 20. Vow of silence starts at the church where we say our praise before. You don't want to come, do you? I shook my head. Didn't think so. S'mores when we get back. Think you can get a fire going? I froze and brought the phone down slowly, as I thought I heard a ringing far away in the woods. There was a rustle and a thud in the distance. Mom. Dad. I thought something was horribly wrong, but 15 minutes later I saw their headlights dancing down the rutted drive and I had to keep from crying in relief. I waited for them on the porch and listened to the car doors slam. That wasn't 20 minutes. I yelled while they were still 50 feet away. I had a fire started, but it went out. Soon there was an enormous fire. My dad kept throwing logs and dragging great dead branches into it. Julie came out with a paper bag from the kitchen and I salivated, remembering s'mores. It couldn't have been much later when I woke. I wasn't a very big 12-year-old, and my father was holding me out in his arms towards the fire. My heart began to race as I realized maybe my perfect family wasn't so perfect. Or maybe they believed strongly in what I thought all along, that I wasn't perfect enough for them. But then I saw something. They were close, but I was still too blind to be sure. At the edge of the firelight, I saw what seemed to be the shapes of bodies hanging from the trees. They swung gently at the ends of nooses. My dad kept carrying me to the house and into my bedroom. My mom peeled back the sheets and as I was gently laid on the mattress, Julie tucked the blankets in around my neck. Then, one set of cold lips after another kissed me goodnight. They turned off the hall light and vanished in the black. Mom, Dad, Julie. But I knew then as well as if I had seen it with perfect clarity, that my parents and sister were hanging in the trees with their faces sawn from their skulls. I didn't hear them walk away, and as I sensed them stare at me from the dark, I laid in bed crying quietly in terror, wondering the same thing then as I do now each and every day. Who were those people? I put my head under the covers as I heard the floorboards creak as they watched me. Who were those people that wore my family's faces?
Need a break? Too bad. These stories don't wait, and neither do we. Next one's worse, in the best way.
Before I'd even read the message, I could tell by the messy handwriting that it was from Toby. Feeling a worm of anxiety in my stomach that I couldn't place. / I left the house 15 minutes later. Winter sunlight made me squint as I made my way down the drive. My footsteps crunched over gravel. I creaked the front gate open, wincing at the sound it made, and as I reached the main village road I glanced instinctively to my right. In the direction of Toby's house. I frowned. Toby's house is a little way down from mine, on the opposite side of the road. An old brick cottage like ours. Normally when I look down there I can see 2 cars parked outside, Toby's dad's Land Rover, and his mum's Peugeot. But today there were 3 vehicles. And the third was a police car. I opened my mouth to say something, but Mr. Willows spoke again before I could. "You're up early, Jamie. You off to find your mate?" Mr. Willows was taking another drag on his cigarette, but now he broke off, coughing. He held it away from his face and stared at it, his frown deepening to a scowl. "Last time I buy this shit. They were out of my brand at the co-op, but I'd rather go without than smoke this crap." He flicked the cigarette. I watched it sail from his hand and land in the road. The glowing tip trailed smoke through the air. "Nah, I haven't seen your friend in a while. You off to call on him now, are you?" "No, I'm going to go meet him nearby. He left a note for me this morning." Mr. Willows had been half turned away from me, as if he was getting ready to go inside, but now he paused and looked back. The flicker of some emotion I couldn't place passed behind his eyes. "Left you a note, did he? Old bastard's probably losing it," I thought to myself as I continued down the road. The thing was, we'd already explored the sawmill to death. We'd done it a couple of years back. The place had been a great find at first, a dilapidated old barn that looked like something from a horror film. A ruined building which sat in the middle of a wooded clearing, smack bang between 2 fields. It was spooky, and remote, and we'd had a great time climbing the rafters and exploring every dark corner there was to explore. But that had all been several years ago. We were older now. We'd already done the sawmill to death. / Toby. Toby. The sawmill reared up in front of me. All splintered rafters and chipped brick. An old red door was set into the side of the building, the paint pink faded and flaking off in chunks. Nobody had used it in years, though, and that included me and Toby. We didn't need to. The entire front end of the building was missing, gaping open like a wound. Exposed to the elements. From where I was standing I could just see inside, dusty concrete, old wood, and a scattering of rusted, bramble-chalked tools. No sign of Toby anywhere. "Toby. Where are you, mate? Toby. You in there?" I took another step. "Toby, this isn't funny, mate. If this is all some kind of wind-up and you got me out here for nothing, I'm going to be pissed." I took another step and felt my foot crunch broken glass. The sound made me wince. All around the clearing, the wind suddenly picked up. Tree branches crashed against each other. Leaves shook. The rain began to fall more steadily, the droplets hitting the clearing in a constant patter. I took another step forwards. The shadows were all around me now. The inside of the sawmill smelled like dust and mold. I fumbled in my pocket for my phone, intending to use the little torch function, but as I was pulling it out I caught a shape from the corner of my eye. I looked to my left and bit back a scream. Toby stood in the shadows. He was over by the left-hand wall of the sawmill, standing with his back to the brick. Facing me. I couldn't see his features in the gloom, but I could just make out his thick mop of hair. Toby stood against the wall, unmoving. Toby didn't say anything. Toby still didn't speak. Instead, he slowly lifted his left arm. Held it out away from his body, pointing. I followed his finger. What the fuck? Toby didn't say anything. Just kept pointing. Rain pounded down harder outside the sawmill. The wind howled. I had my phone out of my pocket now, and I thumbed on the little torch. The light spilled out and lit up the shadowy floor. A green tie. That's what Toby was pointing at. It lay coiled next to the bricks in a little heap on the concrete floor. I stepped closer. Toby, wah. But I stopped talking when I got a better look at it. When I saw what was on it. I bent down and picked the tie up. It would have looked shiny and new if it wasn't for the rust-colored blotches darkening the green. The messy, browning stains that covered it. Those marks weren't just on the tie, either, I saw now. The floor below me had been stained the same color. There were patches of the stuff all over the dusty concrete. They looked like... I moved the torch away from the stains and flashed it at the spot Toby had been standing, and my light struck dusty brick. I felt fear and confusion surge through me in a wave. Toby was gone. The wind drowned out my cries. It roared around the old sawmill, making the wooden beams creak. Rain hammered down outside. Rain, and something else. A sound I could only just make out, half muffled as it was beneath the crash of raindrops, the steady, pounding thump of footsteps. Toby. Toby. Mr. Willows was still wearing the suit he'd been in earlier, only now the thing looked wrecked. His pink tie was skewed, his soaked shirt sticking to his chest. His gray hair was sodden, plastered to the skin of his forehead in dark strands. His eyes were wide in his face. He'd been running, one hand pressed to his chest, but as soon as he saw me he slowed down. He came to a stop just inside the shelter of the sawmill, a few feet away from me. Put his hands on his knees and pulled in deep breaths. Mr. Willows. Mr. Willows, what's happened? Are you okay? I stuffed my phone in my pocket and hurried over to him, putting my free hand on his shoulder. My mind was whirling with questions, but I couldn't think which to ask first. Fear swirled in my stomach, fueled by the only explanation I could think of for Mr. Willow's sudden arrival. Either something had happened to my parents, or something had happened to Toby's. Mr. Willows seen me heading in this direction, and followed me. That had to be it. He'd come to tell us. Mr. Willows, what's happened? Is everyone okay? After a few more seconds, Mr. Willows reached up and put his hand on my shoulder for support. Stood up straight. His face was red, and his breathing was still heavy, but he sounded better than he had a moment ago. His wide eyes scanned the shadowy interior of the sawmill, finally resting on my face. Is it just you here? Yeah, it is. I mean, no, Toby was here too, but I don't know where he's gone, and... I followed his gaze and saw the green tie, still clutched in my free hand. I stared down at it stupidly. Outside the sawmill, the wind gusted. The building around us shook and creaked, and it was as I looked back up at Mr. Willows that he moved his free hand, quick and agile as a man half his age, and fastened it around my throat. Within seconds, both his hands were on my neck, squeezing. I choked in a half-breath and stumbled backwards. My heel struck something on the concrete floor and I went down, falling hard on my back. Mr. Willows came down on top of me. I felt pain lance through my back, felt the breath whoosh out of me like air from a balloon. Mr. Willows' face was inches from mine now, red and wrinkled. teeth gritted like a dog. His grip around my neck was impossibly strong, a rigid band of bone. I reached up my hands to grab his arms, to try and break his hold on me, but I couldn't do it. My hands were suddenly too weak. My head felt thick and heavy, and my vision filled with blotches that were the color of red stains on concrete. When Mr. Willows spoke to me, he sounded like he was about to cry. I didn't mean it, Jamie, I swear I didn't. I liked you boys, you know that. He tightened his grip. But I can't let you tell. I've been in counseling for the past few weeks. Ever since I got out of hospital. I have bruising around my throat, which is still pretty sore, but the doctors say it will heal soon. My parents found me that Saturday morning when they woke up, passed out in our driveway. Covered in mud, soaked through and unconscious. Half dead. Somehow, after coming round in the sawmill, I'd managed to half stumble, half crawl my way back home. With the injuries I had, nobody can believe I managed it on my own. I don't remember much of that journey back. It's all a blur of pain, and numbness, and shadows. But I do remember Toby. I remember him by my side the whole way. Helping me along. Encouraging me to get back up, whenever I fell face down in the mud. Sometimes I thought I heard his voice clearly, and other times it seemed to blend and fade with the wind. It didn't take them long to find his body. Toby had been buried in a shallow grave, somewhere among the trees that ran around the edge of the clearing. Within about 100 meters of the sawmill. Within about 100 meters of the spot where Mr. Willows tried to strangle me. The same spot the police found him, after they came to our house and I wrote the word sawmill on a notepad with a shaking hand. I've seen Toby once since I got out of the hospital. Just once. It was a Saturday morning, and it was early. I'd had trouble sleeping. I woke from whatever nightmare I'd been having in a sweat, my duvet twisted up around me. And before my eyes were even fully open, I heard it. It could have been a bird outside, or a distant neighbor working in their garden. Or it could have been the sound of small stones, striking a window. I swung my legs out of bed and got up to check. His form wavered in the morning sun, half lost in the light. The opposite of a shadow. But it was definitely Toby, smiling up at me. Standing in the same spot he always used to stand, whenever he came to call for me. There were so many things I could have said to him then, so many things I wanted to say, but in the end, I settled for a smile. It was all I had time for.
Anyway, let's lighten the mood with something fun, and... Nah, just kidding. It gets worse. Hit it.
A heavenly smell wafted in from the kitchen. My girlfriend was making dinner for us as she liked to do, though we'd often cook together she offered to cook alone. Smelled like she was making stir-fry, and as I closed the distance I could hear the sizzle of vegetables in a hot pan. I came from behind and wrapped my arms around her. Leaning my head forward I kissed her cheek. "You need any help out here?" I asked while pulling her closer to me. I could see her smile, and she reached an arm up and touched my hair, and then... Crack. A loud cracking sound echoed from her shoulder. It sounded like bone had broken into pieces. It was so loud, and it sounded like it would hurt. I instinctively let go of her, fearful that I may have somehow hurt her. "Holy shit. Are you alright, babe?" I said. "Well, I didn't feel or hear anything." "You sure it wasn't something else?" "Might have just been the veggies in the pan," she said while turning back to the stove to stir the vegetables. I couldn't really answer that. I swear I heard that crack come from her shoulder. It didn't sound like the sizzle of a pan or even a pop. But I let this incident go without making too much of a fuss. Babe, what is going on? Your leg just made a snapping noise. I don't understand. Doesn't that hurt? I asked. You have to get yourself checked out. I think something is wrong. It's not normal for this stuff to be happening. I said. I left the room, not trying to escalate the situation into an even worse argument. I thought she must be lying, but then stopped and thought to myself, what if she was right? But I didn't seem to hear sounds from other people, only from her. For a while I kept quiet about the whole thing, until one night things got even worse. I awoke in the middle of the night to hear the sound of cracking and grinding. It was loud enough to wake me, and when I looked over at my girlfriend I could see her arm was contorting and moving in odd ways, ways that simply weren't possible without bones breaking. My heart beat fast as her arm thrashed around and terror set in. What are you doing? She asked with a scowl on her face. She rolled onto her side facing away from me. I think we need to get you some help. Tomorrow we'll see if we can find a psychiatrist or someone to help you. You can't keep going on and on about this. Well, I only seem to have them when Emily is around. I hear these cracks, like bones breaking, but they only come from her. The sounds are awful, but she says she is fine. I thanked him for his time and scheduled an appointment for next week with his secretary. I can't say it was all that helpful. He didn't really tell me what was wrong either, but I figured I would follow his suggestion. The matter of whether I was crazy or not still seemed up in the air. After the appointment I sat in my car, not really wanting to go home to Emily. Lately it felt like walking on eggshells, her mood was dour, and she constantly bossed me around. I was feeling exhausted with everything. The sounds of bones cracking, and her trying to strangle me was scary, even if it wasn't real. I stopped by the store to pick up a notebook to document everything as the doctor ordered. But then an idea popped into my head. I figured there was one way to prove, or disprove, my sanity. I went to the store and bought a tape recorder. If I could catch the sounds on tape, then I would know for certain that I wasn't hearing things. No, not yet. He wants to have a follow-up appointment. I think he finds it strange that my symptoms only happen at home, and only around you, I said with hopes of her not being offended. Isn't he supposed to be the expert? Why is that strange? She said while her smile fell into a scowl. There was a brief moment of silence and then crack. A loud crack rang through the room. It sounded like her back just broke, but she didn't even move. I felt my hands begin to clam up, my heartbeat increased. She had no reaction to it as usual. Her mouth contorted into a sneering grin as she looked at me. My back what? It cracked. Why is that strange? The tinny voice of Emily spilled from the recorder. There was a moment of silence. I felt more nervous as time passed slowly. I tried to back away as the blood poured from her twisted neck, but she was so fast. She leapt at me, knocking me to the ground. She put her hand on my shoulder for a moment before the skin between her wrist and hand split as sharp bone shot out and stabbed me. I cried out in pain as my blood began to trickle down my arm, but adrenaline pumped through me. Using my legs I kicked her away. The sounds of bones cracking filled the room as she flew back against a wall. Pulling myself to my feet I fled from the building with a splintered bone protruding from my shoulder. The grinding and snapping noises grew fainter as I escaped. I clutched my shoulder as I made my down the sidewalk trying to get further away from her, or whatever that thing was. The blood flowed from my shoulder and I reached into my pocket and called 911 before I lost consciousness. When paramedics arrived I vaguely remember them taking me in the ambulance. The doctors whispered in hushed tones as to why part of a radius bone was sticking out of my shoulder, but they took care of me nonetheless. When I thought no one would hear me I spilled a few tears, but I guess I was not as quiet as I could have been. A nurse walked into the room, as I scrambled to try and hide my tears, but it was obvious I was crying. "Don't worry, dear. You'll be out of here soon. There's no need to cry," she said. The nurse went and pulled a tissue from a tissue box, and as she handed it to me there was a loud crack that rang throughout the room. It sounded like her arm had broken. My eyes widened and she looked at me with a sinister grin.
Sleeping yet? Didn't think so. Next story's up. And yeah, it's worse. You're welcome.
When I was 9, my mother crawled into bed with me. I had been sleeping, but when I felt her hot, bitter breath on my back I woke up. I was instinctively tense. 9 was too old for cuddles. Something was wrong. "I'm going to cut my wrists," she whispered. "I'm going to kill myself and it'll be all your fault." Her skin on my body felt like a wet fish. I did my best to hold in my tears. "Ryan, are you awake? I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to tear my veins apart." I didn't sleep after she left. I just stayed in a fetal position, crying softly into my knees, hoping that she was telling the truth. When I was 15 I started seeing a therapist. It was my mother's suggestion, ironically. There was a doctor who specialized in whatever I was supposed to have. "What brings you to therapy, Ryan?" the doctor asked. I closed my eyes. "Because it's gotten worse." "No. Amanda, please. I want to explain why I don't talk to my mother." "You were abused. You never told me. I'm coming over." "Ryan, have you ever considered that the woman outside your window isn't your mom?" I would fall asleep and she'd be there, in my dreams. Her naked body against mine, melting onto me. I would try to call for help, but I was trapped in this in-between space. Every night. The same dream. I often thought about killing myself, but I knew that's what she wanted. "You need to talk to me." I was near screaming out of frustration. "I want you to be out of my life. Stop coming to where I live, stop showing up in my dreams. I don't know how you dash. No, you did those things to me. You tortured me."
And now, as the hour gets cold and the shadows stretch long into the corners of your room, it's time.
Yeah. Chew the spooky violin. But seriously, this next one? Even I didn't sleep after hearing it.
I've claimed something coming from you.
What? Just because I sleep in a coffin and collect cursed dolls?
Among other things. This is the final descent for the night. One last story, dragged up from the depths of the disturbed and deranged.
Go ahead. Turn off the lights. We dare you.
This is Horror Slop.
I didn't know Will could draw, I remember thinking as my friend's hand quickly moved across the page. And then I looked more closely at Will's impromptu sketch, and I immediately regretted it. I tried to unsee it. I shifted my attention to other things around me, anything at all that wasn't ink on the page, the blur of Will's hand, the beads of sweat gathering at his temples, the gentle autumn breeze creeping through the crack of the window. Don't look at the page. Just don't look at it. But I knew I had to. So I looked. And it was worse than I expected. Much worse. The animal flashed a welcoming, toothy smile. A hoof pointed at me, nearly coming right out of the page. But it didn't want me to join the U.S. Army. No, this goat-headed creature had something else in mind. Under that declaration, in slightly smaller letters, it read, "At Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone." Opening soon. I'd never heard of Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone before yesterday. The place, I quickly learned, played host to a significant moment in Will's childhood. And although I'd been good friends with him for 15 years, he'd never told me the story. But today, he'd opened up. I wasn't trying to reopen any wounds from his past. I just wanted him to tell me a story. Any story. I've been listening to a lot of NPR, and being inspired by their storytelling segments and slices of American life, I purchased some professional recording equipment and set up a makeshift studio in my house. My goal was to capture and archive the stories of my friends, relatives, really anyone who had something to say. Call it boredom. I was a widower with a 7-year-old son. Besides doting on my kid, I needed something productive to fill the time. My recording area was cozy, just a couple microphones, a small table, a few chairs. I'd sit a few feet from my interview subjects. The intimacy would induce real honesty and emotion. That was the plan, and it worked a little too well. I never thought my storytelling experiments would go so wrong, so quickly. And it wasn't just Will's story and his sketch of the Uncle Sam human/goat hybrid thing. Before I'd interviewed Will, I heard another version of Will's events from the other person involved in the Family Fun Zone incident, Will's wife and my good friend, Caroline. I interviewed Caroline first, and Will's interview occurred the following day. Both of my friends requested I not tell the other about the contents of their respective interviews. I'm certainly not planning on it. Both interviews were long and free-ranging. I'll just transcribe the relevant portions of their stories, the stuff about relationships and about Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone. It's important that these stories be shared in some form. We went to the same schools growing up, but we weren't friends or anything like that. You know how you kind of know everyone you go to school with, but most people are just on the periphery. That was Will. Always there, but not really. We ran with different circles. You can't pinpoint the moment you actually met for the first time. Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone. What was the legend? It's been so long. But, from what I remember, it was a children's play zone type place that existed in the late 70s or early 80s. No one could pinpoint it. But the story was this guy, Jerry something, but everyone called him Uncle Jerry, inherited a piece of land out in the woods from his grandfather. He took all of his money and turned it into the fun zone, you know, slides, games, trampolines, kind of like an indoor rec type place. But all barnyard themed, so the place looked like a red and white barn with a silo, but inside was all of this kid stuff. That's what everyone said. But the messed up part was what happened there. Apparently like 30-some years ago, a kid slid down the slide and just vanished into the ball pit. Like, there was no trace of him. I think he was only 4, maybe 5. I can't remember for sure. Anyway, they emptied the ball pit and everything. The only thing at the bottom was a trap door and a crawlspace that led nowhere. It just dead-ended. No one knew why it was there. But yeah, the kid vanished, the town freaked, Jerry split, and the place shut down. And that really happened. Yeah, so I decided to write about Uncle Jerry's, and Will heard about it. He joined the newspaper club because he wanted to help, laughs, I think he just wanted to spend time with me. But he helped me with my research. We talked to people, looked at old newspapers, spent a lot of time in those creepy library stacks. That's where Will held my hand for the first time. God, we were so young. Nothing. There was no record of the place. We even talked to the police department. They had nothing. Did they know what you were talking about? Oh, yeah. Everyone had heard of Uncle Jerry's. And everyone was really nice about helping us, but nothing factual existed. My article was going terribly. It was all dead ends. To a place that didn't exist. Did you go there? No, it's fine. It's just. Seriously, Caroline, I'm not trying to psychoanalyze you or ruin your marriage by making you dredge up terrible memories. That's not what I'm trying to. It's okay. I want you to know. Pauses, I want you to know. It wasn't supposed to be there. It just wasn't. What happened was Will was going to go there first to make sure it was safe. And I'd meet him there later on. And I did. I followed the directions perfectly, down all of these forgotten dirt roads that used to be real roads. Right turn at a rock the size of a Volkswagen, go 3/4 of a mile and take a left at the pine tree with the downed limb, stuff like that. All landmark stuff. But the directions were perfect. I drove what felt like forever down this bumpy road, and it just ended. Nowhere else to go. And there was Will, standing at the side of the road next to his car, hands jammed in his pockets. And he had this look in his eyes, he just looked different. It's almost like, after that night there were two Wills. The first Will, who had worked on the story, helped me research and held my hand in the library. He was so sweet. Just so shy. Tender, innocent. But after that night, he changed forever. Like, he never looked at me the same way again. And we've been married now for 9 years, and together since junior year of college, so 13 years. And he's never looked at me the way he looked at me in the basement of the library back in high school. It was that night at the fun zone that changed him. I know it. It was that night. Have you ever thought about us? Like, what if our parallel universe had fully intersected forever with the real one? And we were together? Please, don't. It's just, me and Will, 9 years, no kids. No babies. And he just doesn't look at me like he's supposed to. He's supposed to give me a baby, and we're supposed to be living this love story, but something went wrong. And it all started that night. I pulled off to the side of this dirt road that no one had driven on in probably decades, and, like I said, Will just seemed different. I asked him if he'd found it, and he said that it was there. Uncle Jerry's family fun zone was there. Will grabbed 2 flashlights from his car, and we followed a path through some brush. Then it kind of emerged before us, nestled in the trees. The barn, the silo, everything. It was so strange. It was almost like it materialized, if that makes sense. Did you go inside? I mean, we came all that way, right? The main entrance was this huge, wooden double door. Probably 15 feet high, and above it was the sign, Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone, with this picture of a cartoon farmer with a piece of straw hanging from his mouth. And the sign had been vandalized. Someone had spray-painted X's over the farmer's eyes, and nearly every letter had been scribbled out. Everything except for fun, but the F was turned into an R and an exclamation point was added. So it just read, run. So we weren't the first people that had been there. And I remember thinking, I don't know if this makes me feel better or worse. I guess it was adrenaline. Our flashlights were directly on the hatch, and it had one of those round, steel rings. No lock. We stared at it for a while without saying anything. Almost like we were expecting it to start pulsating or to pop open. But we wanted to know what was inside. Had to know. So we decided to do it together. We grabbed the steel ring with both hands and pulled it up. I thought I'd be greeted by the bones of that dead kid, but there was only the smell that rushed us. It was very cold and crisp, and with a tiny whiff of sulfur. Will hopped right in, and I reluctantly followed. The stories were all true, it was a crawlspace to nowhere. We crouched down and crawled about 20 feet, and the tunnel just ended. Nothing but a smooth, steel wall. We ran our hands across it. Maybe we'd find a secret handle or trigger a button or something, but there was nothing. And then we heard the noises from above. Holy God! No. It just watched us for a while. And I never opened my eyes. And the next thing I remember is the hatch slamming shut and both Will and I jumping and hitting our heads on the crawlspace ceiling. We stayed there silent for, it had to be an hour. We eventually worked up the courage to crawl to the other end in pitch black, and I was praying, just praying that this thing or person or whatever wasn't inside this crawlspace with us. We were too scared to even turn on our flashlights. Every inch we crawled I thought, this is it, I'm going to reach out and feel something warm and snarling. But we made it to the end, and we slowly raised the hatch. Thank God it hadn't locked us inside. We climbed out and we ran, just ran. I don't even remember my legs moving beneath me. I remember it being, I was in the crawlspace, now I'm outside, now I'm at the car. Just like that, we were safe. Why not? Will is, I love Will. But it changed him. It changed me. Pause, how long has it been since Grace died? We talked about everything. At least for my part. And I'm sure she wasn't keeping anything from me. I think what we had was rare. And Tyler is my world. He's my everything. Do you ever think? The interview direction veered towards love and marriage. I tried to avoid it, but it came up organically. Will hesitated, contemplating. I'd hope we'd detour right around it, but he looked at me sharply in the eyes, and said, "Have you ever heard of Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone?" I lied, and I told him that I hadn't. He grabbed a sheet of paper from my desk and sketched out the Uncle Sam type flyer for that cursed children's fun zone. That's where this interview excerpt kicks in. I was sitting in class. I think it was Spanish. And I look over, and this beautiful girl in the row next to me is furiously scribbling in her notebook. And she's drawing this. Will holds up the sheet of paper. I can't explain it, but I was drawn to it. There was something about it. So I stopped her after class, and I asked her, "What's Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone?" Because I'd never heard of the damn place. Was it a place in town? That's the thing. It apparently was some kids' play area type place in the 1970s, and some little kid drowned in a ball pit, if that makes sense. Caroline told me the whole story, saying it was the most famous legend in our town and she was writing a newspaper story about it. But I'd never heard of it. I asked all of my friends, my parents, teachers. And I always got the same response, "What are you talking about?" And that made me more curious. Is this beautiful girl putting me on? Or does she have a wild imagination? Because according to Caroline, this legend was as famous as Bigfoot or the Loch Ness Monster or whatever. Did you guys get together? I know you started dating in college. I didn't know you had a history. Not really. I mean, almost. Caroline had this pull on me that was hard to explain. We were spending a lot of time together. And she was gorgeous and funny, and motivated, man, just motivated to find out more about this Uncle Jerry's place. And I liked it. Even when I thought she was maybe a little crazy, I liked it. But she wasn't crazy. So it was real. What did he put in the mailbox? Did you tell Caroline? I don't expect you to understand any of this. It doesn't make any sense, but I felt it. I'm telling you, it was real. In my heart, I had this hideous feeling it was all related to this Uncle Jerry's Family Fun Zone obsession. I thought Caroline was looking for this place and was going to offer up my brother as some form of a sacrifice. Just saying it sounds so messed up. You probably think I'm yanking your chain. I mean, this is my wife we are talking about here. This is Caroline. No. They'd probably think I was the crazy one. The whole thing was insane beyond belief. But I had to know what she was up to, so here's what I did. I told Caroline I'd found directions to Uncle Jerry's, told her they had been folded up in some library book about the town's history or something. I gave her directions to the place, and I told her I'd check it out first. But here's the thing, I gave her the wrong directions. I made them up. Wrote down a bunch of gibberish. They led miles outside of town in the opposite direction. And then I followed my directions, the ones the old man left me, and they led me right to it. It was real. This Uncle Jerry's place, it was real, man. It made no sense. And then Caroline showed up. With the wrong directions? No, just a little more. There's some things that you should know. I'd never seen Caroline so excited. Still haven't. I swear she was bouncing around that place. Wanted to explore every inch. She even pulled me into some horrifying corn maze I thought we'd never get out of. And then we found it. We found the place where that kid had disappeared. Caroline pulled open this hatch in this enormous, empty ball pit, and we wiggled through this crawlspace that dead-ended, and then we heard something. Someone else was inside the barn. We heard its footsteps above us, and it was stomping around. I thought, maybe it was the old man, because who else would know we were here? It wasn't. No way. We were huddled up at the end of the crawlspace, and my legs were shaking so bad I thought they would spring free from my body. Caroline held them down for me. She was so calm, just so calm. The hatch opened, and in the dark I saw this figure kind of lean down. It definitely wasn't the old man. It was too skinny. It couldn't have been a person. It just couldn't. So we stared at it from across this crawlspace, and at one point I turned to look at Caroline, and she was watching this thing with this little grin on her face. And that thing kept right on looking and breathing, and then, all of a sudden, it kind of sniffed the air. Like it was smelling us. And the voice, God, I'll never forget it. It was this voice that was deep and raspy and terrible all at the same time. It said, not young enough. Then it slammed down the hatch, and it was gone. We waited a while, and when we thought it was safe we ran back to our cars. It's fine. It's just, someone needed to know. I'm just glad it's you. Because someone had to marry her, and it had to be me. Does that make sense? I know what happened at that place. I know that there's evil things in this world that have grabbed hold of her. But she's better. She never wrote that article, never talked about Uncle Jerry's family fun zone since then. I'm not sure if she even remembers it. Maybe the evil is gone. It could be gone forever. But I'm always waiting for it to come back. And that's why, I'll tell you this, but this goes to the grave. Yeah. She'll find out. If you guys do fertility, the doctors will find out. I don't know. Pauses, I don't know. My original hunch about my interview experiment was correct. There was just something about the microphones and tight space that elicits honesty. What I experienced with Caroline and Will was the rarest forms of honesty, an honesty I hope to never, ever experience again. I wanted to rid myself of the entire situation. Even having the audio files just felt wrong, like I was allowing evil to fester, but then I remembered what Will told me. So I spent hours transcribing their interviews, dumped the text file on a USB drive and tossed it into a box in my closet. I deleted the audio files from my computer, and then put my microphones and recorders out to the curb. It just wasn't worth it. But the purging didn't cure me. I was haunted by Will and Caroline's stories. And it wasn't just the horrific situations they found themselves in as high schoolers. It was the secrets and lies they've lived ever since. Will and Caroline came over for dinner a few weeks after the interviews, and it was like nothing was wrong. We drank, we laughed, I watched Will touch the small of Caroline's back and Caroline gently caress Will's elbow. It all seemed so frighteningly normal. But I knew what they were living with, and it terrified me. We reached the front door, and Caroline looked over towards my living room. Tyler lay nestled into the cushions, lost inside the pages of a fantasy book. Caroline smiled longingly at my boy, and said to no one in particular, "Not young enough." 10.
And there you have it, dear listeners. One final scream, echoing into the void.
Yeah. Void screams, eternal darkness, I did it. Can I eat now?
We're still on air, Roxy.
Oh no, just the spooky FCC is gonna haunt us for breaking the mood.
If you enjoyed tonight's descent into depravity, don't forget to like, subscribe, and what does he always say?
Stab that bell icon like it's your ex possessed by a demon, and leave a comment telling us what story made you question. I have choices.
And if you survive the night, we'll be waiting.
Same dat time, same that crypt.
You're the reason we have complaints, you know that.
You're welcome.